All right, welcome everyone to the February 17th, 2015 Shakopee City Council meeting. I call the meeting to order, and Ms. Henson, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Councilman Whiting.
Here.
Councilman Luce.
Here.
Councilman Mokel.
Here.
Councilman Lehman.
Here.
Mayor Tapke.
Here. All stand for the pledge. I'm not sure how long it's going to take me before I stop calling Ms. Weckman. It's gonna be a couple times yet, I think. All right, item number 3, approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions or corrections?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, staff has 3. Agenda item 4A3, related to pot-bellied pigs in residential zoning districts, should be moved from consent and relocated to 10A1. Item 10C1, related to payment for the retention of a temporary extension of Veerling Drive, is on your table in front of you tonight and should be added to the agenda. And item 12A is not listed as a closed session, but will be discussed in closed session as allowed for under state law.
All right, so we have moved, just to make everything clear, we've moved 4A3 out of consent as to item number 10A1. Under community development, we've added item 10C1.
That's Veerling Drive.
Yep, that's the Veerling Drive piece, and then we're gonna put 12A into the closed session. Anything else from council? Is that all correct? Okay. Do you have any, Councilor Whiting? Oh,
Go ahead.
Councilor Whiting,
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
do we have a second?
I have a question.
We need a second first. Councilor Lehman? Councilor Luce, discussion.
F2, there's a typo. I just want to point that out.
What F2?
In the minutes?
Hmm?
In the minutes?
I got
What number? 4F2?
4F2. Yes.
Oh, okay.
You marked it. Oh, here it is. Number 4, second column, or second paragraph, misspelled change, just to correct, keep it straight. Second line, second paragraph.
Okay, noted. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Move on to item number 4, consent business. Remember, we pulled 4A3 off of consent. Anything to remove or add to consent this evening? Councilor Whiting?
Make a motion to approve the consent business as modified.
So be it.
We have a motion by Councilor Whiting, second by Councilor Luce. Any discussion on those items? Ms. Wilson, could you please call the consent business?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 4A1 adopts ordinance number 902, amending City Code Section 11.7 related to signs. 4A2 adopts ordinance number 901, amending the City Code Section 11.81 Subdivision 7 related to home occupations. 4A3 was removed from consent and relocated elsewhere on the agenda. 4C1 adopts resolution number 7549, approving plans and specifications and ordering advertisement for bids for the 2015 bituminous overlay project, project number 2015-2. 4F1 approves the payment of bills and electronic transfers in the amount of $1,574,122.95. 4F2 approves the minutes of the February 3rd, 2015 City Council meeting. 4F3 approves the application and grants a temporary on-sale liquor license to the Minnesota Farm Winery Association for April 25th, 2015 at Canterbury Park Event Pavilion, 1100 Canterbury Road. 4F4 adopts resolution number 7550, changing the May 5th, 2015 City Council meeting date to May 6th, 2015, and calling for additional City Council workshops on March 12th, March 31st, and April 14th, 2015. 4F5 adopts resolution number 7554, appointing individuals to various boards and commissions. 4F6 adopts resolution number 7553, supporting a job creation fund application on behalf of RAR Corporation.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 5, recognition of involved citizens by City Council. This time when anybody has an item they'd like to speak with us that is not on the agenda this evening can have up to 5 minutes. to discuss an item. No action will be taken on that item at this time. If there's anybody here that would like to be recognized. All right, seeing no one, we're going to move on to item number 6A, public hearing for Hilldale Drive Improvement Projects. Entertain a motion to open a public hearing. Councilor Lehman,
Motion to open the public hearing.
do we have a second?
So be it.
Second by Councilor Luce. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. Loney.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. This is a continued public hearing from October 21st, which was continued to January 20th, but then continued to tonight. Waiting for some more information. I'm going to give a good background of where we're at and the other items that we have brought forward since we met on October 21st. But we started this process on September 17th, 2013, by ordering the preparation of feasibility report. We did this with the petitions from the property owners asking for that. Let's see here. Oops, I lost it. Okay, I don't know why it's not moving forward. Just do it this way. Hilldale Drive is in the Zosky addition. It was platted in '72. The road is about 1974, rural residential roadway. Kind of the overview of the proposed improvements. Spring Lake Lane was built by Ryland Homes. Sewer and water was extended to Hilldale Drive for the eventual sewer and water extension in this area. Sewer would be placed in Hilldale Drive. Water main would be placed in Hilldale Drive with a loop over to Glacier Estates, this 8-inch line, and an 18-inch line that would go all the way also to Glacier Estates along County Road 16. We also included a bituminous trail previously as well. Cost was $657,000. Total project, there was a breakdown. Funding sources, the big number is assessments of $287,800. With that summary, we have 10 lots that we're assessing, and essentially it comes out, the assessment was $28,780. When we break it down further, there's a breakdown of the assessments, $7,800 for street, $1,300 for storm sewer. There's mainly culverts underneath driveways. We may or may not need that, but we put that in there. $6,500 for sanitary, $13,000 for water main. And then these are the connection fees and charges associated with sanitary, sewer, and water. Being trunk sanitary, trunk water, water connection charge, sewer connection, that's a plumbing permit, city SAC, Met SAC, and a water meter. So we gave this information to the residents back then, and with the high costs, with the connection fees, $14,400, $28,780 for assessments, and they still have to hook up after that, so it came out to about $47,000. That was not, you remember getting the petition from the residents the last time, that was not acceptable. Didn't want to move forward with the project. Some other information, there are 2 septic systems here that do have to have their systems replaced. The county has deemed them as failure. Most of the other septic systems are 30 years old or older, except for one at, I'd have to go back here, one at address 1975 Hilldale Drive. That was replaced in 2001. All the other ones are the original. So we also talked about financing, assessment terms usually 10, we could consider a 20, and could assess trunk charges and water connection fees if a waiver of assessment appeal is granted. Again, this project, the 18-inch trunk line, Spuck would like to see that included in 2016. Oops, excuse me here. So the residents issued a statement of concern petition, which you saw. They were concerned about the trail, benefit analysis. They thought the cost was too high, and then Hilldale Drive needs some repair, which we will take care of. Rezoning was also an issue with this project, because in order to put sewer, we'd have to rezone it from rural residential to either R1A, R1B, or rural sewer, rural residential. I just want to say one other thing with the statement of concern. We said we'd look at a benefit appraisal, really was a way to see what benefit we had. So we hired Patchen, Messner, Dodd, and Brum to do a benefit appraisal consultation with us. What this came back with is estimated on the property was $28,000 per assessable unit. There's the second page of that. The summary in the report also talks about $28,000 for sewer and water and new street. Alternatively, we asked them, well, the question is, because one of the options we thought about is, what if we just did the street and the sanitary? What does that benefit? And that came out to $20,000. So if you look at again, the assessment question here, I just want to point out one item here. We did lower the trunk sanitary sewer charges to rural residential. In December, we passed a resolution saying that we would charge a max of 0.3 acres versus the actual acreage. This is because that same lot size and next door produces the same amount of sewage. So that reduced this from 29,000 to about 8,000. Everything else stayed the same. The sewer and water with all the fees is under 20,000. If you add the water, it's the assessment and trunk charges, area charges is 21,000. This chart here will probably try to simplify, I hope, for everybody, the options. Option one is do what the feasibility study said. Reconstruct the street, put sewer and water in for the entire 10 lots. Feasibility was 28,780, but we have a cap now from our benefit appraiser. And the estimated connection fees dropped from 14,400 to 12,687, so a total cost of 40,687. And this is what the special benefit was. Option two is if we reconstruct the street, install sanitary sewer, also install the 18-inch water transmission line, but there'd be no services to homes. The assessments would be 15,700, connection fees 4,000. Most of that is Metropolitan and Council SAC, which everybody pays. So the cost of that is just under 20,000, which meets the benefit test. Option three is if we just resurface the street, install the water transmission line, there'd be a $7,800 assessment. We didn't really have an analysis on that, but that would be the total cost. It would be no sewer and water, other than the 18-inch transmission line. Option four is do nothing at this time, which I don't know if that's a viable option. These are just maps I included in your council packet. Option one is 40,600, that's sewer and water and street. The total connections, charges and everything with that is 126,000 or 12,600 a lot. I'm gonna go through these pretty fast, but because I just went through them. Option two, it's just under 20,000. Then the connection fees are 40,000. That's for all 10 lots, about 4,000 a lot. Option three, just do the street and the water transmission line. Option four, do nothing. One other item I got from the county, who is very much in support and favor of putting sanitary sewer in this area. This is what they have, a status of septic system in Shakopee as of 2012. The property at 2075 has since been determined that that is a failed system. That should be a red dot. That needs replacement. The other item that the county mentioned to me is that this area at Hilldale is in what's called a high susceptible groundwater contamination area, being that it's close to bedrock and sandy soils. So that's a concern. I did check further. It sounds like many of the residents have wells 300 feet. If that's the case, and that contamination concern is somewhat minimized. If they had local wells, only 50 to 100 feet, then that can be a real concern. So summarizing this, the street is 40 years old. It needs to be rebuilt. Whatever we do, whatever project, all these streets eventually need to be rebuilt. This area, septic and well and 2 septics have failed, need to be replaced. The county says if we decide not to put sanitary sewer, they need to be replaced this year. This area is in a high susceptible groundwater contamination area, which I mentioned before. So the questions, I think, for this whole project, and you have a letter from the residents on this, a statement, and basically wishing to have this, they want sewer and water, but they would like the assessments and the connection fees and trunk charges capped at 28,000 max. So I guess the question is, do we want to leave this area septic and well? If we say yes, then that would be another 30 years before it would come around again. That would be option number 3. Second question, is council willing to cap the assessments and connection charge at 28,000? Option 1, as proposed by the residents. One option, if option number 1 is not somewhat recommended, or we don't agree, or however this works out tonight, this is somewhat of a, trying to see what direction we should go from the council, and you will hear from the residents here too. This is, what's normally done is you usually put sewer and water in. That's the normal process. However, if option 1 is not somewhat, we don't agree on the cost, option 2 is another solution, because the street needs to be redone, and if we redo the street, do we not want to put any pipes in the ground? Or again, you have to leave the septics and the wells there for another 30 years before you'd redo the street. And Spuck would get their 18-inch transmission line. There are septics that are failing. Most of them are 30-some years old, so they are not far behind, in my estimation. So these can be all done with the cost parameters and meet the benefit test. Finally, this is kind of a tough project. Some of the things we're also looking at, there's a possibility we could apply for clean water grant application with the MPCA. Prior Lake did this with impaired waters, with septic systems so near to impaired waters. We could possibly try for a grant. I'm thinking it's around $1,600 to $2,000 in cost. We wouldn't know anything about that till later, but later this summer. Application is due by March 6th. So that's a possibility for more funding. Can't guarantee it. We may get very little, or we may even get a reduced interest rate, but it may be something. This is somewhat precedent setting, so what do we do for other rural subdivisions as they come forward too? So this is kind of where we're at with the process. And if you do order a project, you need 4/5 vote. As this was more of a council initiated project based on the petition. We didn't really get an official petition for the residents asking for the improvements, just a feasibility study. So with that, I would take any questions from the council.
Questions? Counselor Whiting?
Bruce, could we use some of the SAC credits for the city sewer access charge costs that we have banked?
Well, we did pass a SAC credit policy, which I'm sure you're aware of. And that was only for commercial and industrial based on job creation. So it is a council policy decision if you want to do that. I mean, we could waive the city SAC. It's only $475, and the Met SAC is $24.85. But that's a council policy decision. I know when I talked to Julie, she didn't want to recommend that, but because that's something that everybody pays, but that's something you can do.
If I can continue,
You do.
the grant program you mentioned, you said you wouldn't hear anything till the end of the summer.
Right.
Could we postpone this, or would we just continue with the project, whatever we decide, and then wait to see if this grant helped reduce that cost?
Yeah, I mean, you can continue, I don't know, you can continue the public hearing. I don't know if there's a statute, Jim, is there a limitation? I don't believe there
Oh,
is.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, no, there's no limitation, but I'm not sure you need to continue the public hearing for
Right.
that purpose. I
No.
think you could close the public hearing and
And you can delay table action on the project.
But you couldn't start the action and wait to see if the grant came along and reduced the cost?
Yeah, yes, you could, if you wanted to order a project and see if the grant, or you can wait until the grant comes in before ordering a project, you can do any of that.
Thank you.
Counselor Luce?
There's a number of those that have failed, and the county said they had to do them this year, correct?
2 of them.
Okay. So if they have to do theirs and they do them this year, and we're not gonna hear till the end of the year, they're gonna be paying double if we decide to go ahead.
Well, the county, if the decision is, we're not gonna put sewer in, or whatever, we're not gonna do it, then the county will say, then the people have to replace their systems. If we're still negotiating a potential project, they will still grant an extension.
Okay.
That make sense?
Councilor Mokel?
In the letter from the residents, Mr. Loney, they talked about the public plastic piping from their house to the connection. That isn't something that we authorize as a city, right? Or is that a SPUC issue?
Council Mokel, members of council, that is I'm talking to Joe Adams earlier here, that is a SPUC policy that they require copper. So that has been what they have been requiring for, it's not a city requirement.
Change that?
I think Joe is here, he can address that issue. I think there's a potential.
Welcome, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joe Adams, Shakopee Public Utilities, Planning and Engineering Director. To answer the specific question, it's been SPUC's policy to require copper or ductile iron pipe as service lines to their residential or non-residential customers. It would require a change in their water policy manual to have something, a different material like plastic.
That's saying it's possible. So you're saying it's possible?
I'm saying it would require someone to make a written request addressed to the utilities manager, who would then put it on the SPUC board's agenda, and then they would take it up as an agenda on the item at that request.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Lehman?
The policy of not allowing SAC credits for residential, when that was adopted, it was a 3-2 vote with Councilor Clay and myself, trying to get it to be used for residential properties that had septic systems of long-term, that had groundwater, potential for future groundwater contamination issues, and the council at that time didn't do that, and obviously myself and Mr. Clay were wanting to do that. So I actually agree with Jay on that, but we didn't do that at the time. So I would be in favor of using that for this purpose, because I think it serves multiple purposes. I mean, it's something we've got to be looking at in the future when you have septic systems. If you're going to get them off the system and protect your groundwater, that's an incentive to do it. I do have some other questions, Mayor, and one of them is for probably the utility. The water access charges, there's 2 charges, is a hookup charge and a water access charge. And I don't think they're broke down by the lot. They're a lump sum for the total project. Is that correct?
The water connection charge is per lot. That would be right here. There's 10 units.
Okay.
The trunk water charge is by the acre.
So
whatever the acreage is,
So is it 2,800 for 13 acres?
2794 per acre,
Okay.
come up with 36,000.
Okay, so that's total project.
Yeah, and then 10 units, 4927, that's a recent SPUC water connection charge that we saw, so that's 49,000 there.
Okay, so for $5,000, what is the household getting?
In the ability to hook up to water, I suppose.
They're paying to put the pipes and stuff in the ground to have that ability.
Hi. The 2 fees that SPUC has established, 2 separate funds, the water connection fund and the water connection charge based on SAC units, is used for water supply, treatment, storage, and pressure facilities. So those are the costs of drilling new wells, pump houses with treatment facilities in there, booster stations, and water storage tanks, for the first cost of the additional facilities because of new demand, new development coming online. The trunk water fund, the trunk water charge is used to oversize water mains that pass through developments or in county road corridors. Spuck has a policy of having the equivalent of a 12-inch water main, a trunk water main, every every half mile, east to west and north to south across the system as a super grid in addition to the lateral water main grid of the pipes that the customers or developers put in a network of pipes in order to serve their plat. The purpose of that super grid is to reinforce for fire flow protection.
Is it not an 8-inch that's going east of Hilldale?
Yes, the lateral water main requirements are based on a combination of factors. One is zoning, one is the land area that's being crossed. And in this case, there needs to be the equivalent of 2 8-inch pipes running east to west across the plat and one north to south.
And north and south happens to be an 18-inch underneath the Hilldale?
A portion of it, the portion from Spring Lake Lane south to the county road, and the portion east to west from that point to the east to Glacier Estates, that's where Spuck takes the trunk water charge funds and pays that cost difference between an 8-inch, which is the plat's lateral requirement, and the oversizing to make it 18-inch for a trunk facility.
Otherwise, that number would be bigger if it was per project.
Right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Other questions at this point? All right, seeing none from council, we'll open this up. This is a public hearing. So if anyone would like to speak with us this evening about your thoughts and ideas on this project, we would love to hear you. You have a maximum of 5 minutes. And when you come up, you need to say your name and address and also write it down on the sheet of paper that's up there. So most of you have been through this already. Your old hats.
Good evening, Susan Van Isle, 1975 Hilldale Drive. As you can see, it's just, the bill has gotten too large. Everyone's complaining. The 28,000 is what the the assessment study did, and we were hoping that that's what they would say for including everything. We had quite a bit of discussion about that study, and we found it, as residents, of course, we found it to be very inaccurate. There was nothing south of the river in that whole project, in that whole report. I mean, you had Lino Lakes, you had Chanhassen, Eden Prairie, Independence. I mean, none of those places are even close to coming into Scott County. We thought there would have been something in Scott County. Nothing. The closest thing on this side of the river was Farmington, and those people only paid $9,000 for their whole project. And that was the only one that had water, sewer, and a street. And every one of those projects also included, they all had curb and gutter in their projects. The one in Lino Lakes was also one that had water, sewer, and street put in. And they were showing the feasibility study on that the house sold for $288,000 after the project was done. Well, 2 years later, the house sold again, which was never in the report, for $125,000. So as far as we were concerned, the report really didn't show to us that we could actually recover $28,000, especially when it's going to cost us $41,000. So that was our biggest concern. But as far as just putting in the sewer, personally, I would just be fine with that, because we do, if you read the petition that we included, we do want to keep our wells because of watering, because of such acreage that I have. I mean, it takes me 2 to 3 days just to water my yard. So I couldn't really turn off and on like the city water system would want you to not water between such and such a time and only for so many hours. That would never work. So if we are going to keep, and talking with the water people at our meeting a couple weeks ago, it would be up to them to decide if we could keep our wells or not. And I kind of got the impression that maybe they might not, because we wouldn't be using enough water then. Seeing they're putting in those lines for 10 homes, they might just say, no, you can't keep your wells because we want to make more water. We want to generate more water from you, which actually we would be helping the water system, not watering our yards off of drinking water. And then as far as getting this project done, I mean, we're all getting tired of it. I mean, we want it done. We want either a yes, a no, or something, because this has been going on since 2012, when we started first asking about a study and everything. So we're kind of getting tired of it. And if we do go with a program of just putting the sewer in and the street, we would love to have it done by next year and be done with it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Au.
Hi there, my name is Brandon Crumweed. I live at 2075 Hilldale Drive. I was curious if I can use the overhead by chance?
Sure. The magicians in the back of the room took care of it for you.
It's always nice to have.
Yeah.
All right. So Bruce did a really nice job of breaking down the numbers, and I just kind of put this together, and hopefully I can go through it. So I consider this looking at the assessments charges through the eyes of the residents. One of the things that often gets overlooked is the interest, especially if you have to borrow money on a project like this. So I went through and following the same structure that Mr. Loney did. So option 1, option 2, option 3, and then also the fourth option, which is what we proposed in the statement to the city council and you, mayor. Option 1, $28,000 in assessment. Looking at interest at 10 years, 5%. I think that was the number that was given, or is through city loans for assessments. The connection charges, and then again, about $6,000 for us. All these additional connections to the house is based on our property, because we have talked to plumbers to see what the cost difference would be. That's why the concern about plastic versus copper, that'd be $4,000 versus $6,000, so $2,000 alone on that in regards. So with option 1, we're looking at about $54,000. Option 2, only doing the street, sewer, and storm. Sewer assessment there at $15,710, $4,000 on interest, and then of course the $4,000 on connection charges. And again, probably a drop in cost, because instead of running 2 pipes, we're only running the one for the sewer at about $4,000. So we're looking at $28,000 there. So again, as Mr. Loney said, cost-wise, this is a pretty well off. If we have to replace wells, again, we've talked to well drillers and things, approximately $10,000 for a new well. So if those residents that need to replace their wells, it'd be about $38,000 there. Option 3, just doing the road alone, would be an assessment, as Mr. Loney's pointed out, around $7,800. Again, if we have to put in our own mound systems and replace failing septic systems, we're looking at about $16,000 there. $1,240 for the interest. And actually, I just got news that the county is now offering loans for septic system replacement at 0% interest on the loans. So in that case, that $1,200 would be wiped off. And so again, with a well, you're looking at $34,000 to $35,000. Option 4 is what we proposed in the statement to City Council, the mayor, the city engineer, is $28,000, cap it out at maximum to include all assessment and connection charges, with interest on assessments being around $76.38, and then again, the connection to our house, we're looking at about $41,000, or a little over. And again, that's if you need to replace. Clarification on the reason that we have one of those failing septic systems, The reason is that we didn't have enough separation to meet the standards today. When the septic system was put in place, it met standards, but since the standards have changed since then, that is why we are failing. So I just wanted to clarify that. So thank you very
We
much.
were going to publicly shame you from up here. That was our plan.
That's all right. Thank you so much.
No, can I ask a question on this, though?
Yes, Mayor.
All right, so your option 4 here
Yes.
is doing everything under option 1.
Yes, that is correct. At a cap.
So it would be capped at 28,000. So what, if this were to happen this way, Mr. Loney, what would the city's cost be to make up the difference with that? Have you looked at this?
Well, essentially, it'd be all the connection charges, approximately $12,600 per lot, let's say $126,000.
Okay.
Although we could use 10 sewer credits for some of it.
Yeah, you can do that, but you ask for the cost.
Right.
Based on a regular project, what I had up there before, all the connection fees were around $12,600.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Councilor Lehman?
Following your question, Mayor, Bruce, if we did option 4 as presented here, would that stub out sewer and stub out water, and then the properties would have to pay a plumber to do from the property line stub for the water?
Yep.
And
Brandon's got that there's 6,000 connection from
Yep.
house to street.
the sewer would be stubbed, and then they would go from the property line to the house also?
Correct. Normal project, we would put the sewer main and sewer services out to the property line.
Yep. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, anyone else like to speak? This is your last chance. We're going to close the public hearing here. I can see some faces over there.
Get up
All
and
right.
say your 3 cents.
You sure?
Come on, Walt, you know you want to say something there.
Do I need to count like I do with my 7-year-old? Say it's time. You got 1, 2. Yeah.
Well, he wanted to say something. Let him say something.
You knew, huh?
Yeah.
Name's Walt Sweeney, live at 2055 Hilldale Drive. My question is I can't read it on there, the storm sewer or storm drain it, but it was for the culverts under the drive. On our utility bill, it says it's a minimal charge on there. Storm drainage, whatever, and I'm thinking to myself, why am I paying for storm drainage if I have a ditch with my own culvert?
Mayor, member of the council, Mr. Sweeney, that, well, when your water leaves the site, it goes into other areas.
Down the creek?
Well, it also
Or
goes
Bill's
into,
yard.
into other creeks and maybe other pipes, other systems that the city maintains.
Okay.
So that's been our policy since 1985.
That was my question.
Well, thank you. Councilor Lehman?
Mr. Sweeney, of all our proposals in front of us, give us your thoughts on them.
Oh, now you're gonna pick on me?
Absolutely, you stood up.
Oh, this is great precedent here.
I would go with number 4 at Brandon's. The last page.
Councilor Luce?
Being you're the spokesman right now,
Oh,
are all the residents basically in favor of number 4, or could,
I. Thumbs up, yeah. Had to check to make sure.
I that's the feeling I've gotten from speaking with people is that item is what it is. The question for us with that is that incurs $120,000 the cost for the city that would be individual residents cost. So we're spreading out that $120,000 cost throughout the entire community when there could be a great case by other community members to make that this is their responsibility to pay for these items because everybody else has. And the issue that we're running into here is that there's only 10 units on this street, as opposed to if there are 20 units, if they were quarter acre lots, I mean, it would not be an issue. I mean, everybody would be paying $5 to 10 grand at the most, probably, and it would be, so I think this is an isolated case. But that's the question we have to decide, is if this is where we're at with that extra $120-ish thousand, and how, if that's the city's responsibility to recoup, or if we reduce the project to not include that $120,000 extra. Did you have something to say, Ms. Wilson?
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to add that I think staff wants to ensure that council understands that you may be setting a precedent for the future, that we will ensure that the project costs of assessed amount plus fees comes in under the benefit amount. Right now, you only need to have your assessed costs come in under the benefit amount in a legal or technical standpoint. But you would basically be setting a precedence that the city will ensure that both your fees and your assessments can be brought in under that amount. And so while the city would be covering $126,000 approximately on this project, in future projects, you may find yourself covering that amount or more based on the precedence that you would be setting, could be setting. So we just want to make sure that you're aware of that in making your decision.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask if there's anybody else who would like to speak, and then we're going to close the public hearing. Oh, you've already had a shot.
I know, but there's
All right.
enough people that aren't here that would like to talk but aren't here.
Is that the way
Because
this
they're on
works?
vacation, yes.
I didn't know that's the way this works.
Yeah, in
All right.
fact, I could have
You
brought
have a couple minutes
their
here.
proxies.
Yes.
One more thing then. So, say, I mean, you need 4 people to vote for this, correct? And let's just say you guys decide, how can you put such a financial burden on your citizens when you give money away to have all these big companies come in and we never see a benefit because we're not working for them? But I mean, I guess I'm just really concerned that, sure, I know you guys are gonna set a precedent with this because there is other properties that are gonna need it. But most other properties have bigger homes, for one thing. When you're a small home on a big lot, it's hard to justify it. And so I guess I'm just trying to ask that you think about what the total cost is and not just the $28,000. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If nobody else would like to speak, well, entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Councilor Whiting?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Councilor Lehman?
Second.
Second by Councilor Lehman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, so now we have a decision to make. What thoughts do everyone have? And we do need 4 votes no matter what we do on this. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You want to
Just so
order a
everyone's clear.
project. Yep.
Thank you. Councilor Whiting?
I guess I'll start. I want to first point out that this is a huge cost to any family in Shakopee, rich or poor, small house, big house, doesn't matter. It's a lot of money. They are large lots, so doesn't necessarily mean that you'll always have a small house on that lot. Somebody could add on. In fact, now you could add on because you probably couldn't with the sewer systems you had. A lot of environmental concerns here, contamination area, as was mentioned. I like the idea of looking at the grant opportunities, whether or not, I don't think we need to wait on that, though. I think we can come back to that. I don't like the idea of an island with unseptic, when there's city sewer and city water right next to it. And this issue is gonna come up again and again. And of all the issues the city council faces, I think this is gonna be one of the toughest issues we face, because who wants to burden somebody with all that money, that cost? But we would set a precedent by allowing it to go just on septic and wells. And the cost of the new mound system and new well is about right in that $28,000 range, give or take a little bit. So The big issue here, I think, is the fees. Getting around those fees and the way, and I'm gonna speak for Spuck here if I might a little bit, but jump in there if I'm wrong. Those charges, the trunk water charges are there for a purpose, to pay for the wells, to pay for the tanks and the pipes, and just think about running a pipe across a cornfield where nobody's gonna benefit from it. That costs a lot of money. So the way Spuck does it is they have low residential water rates, so that when people connect, that's where they pay, but then they pay that low water rate to help offset that. That's how we do it. Other communities might not do it that way. The one community you mentioned, they might have high water rates, and that's how they pay for things. So I don't believe I could go for just putting the road in without putting pipes in the ground, because that seems like a incredible waste.
Can we all agree on that piece, I assume? Councilor Lehman?
I am keeping all my options open.
So
You don't have much
that's
time left.
Yeah, that's where I stand. If we're gonna put a road in, we gotta put the pipes in.
Okay.
And I'll let someone else speak.
Can we break this up just a little bit here? The sewer versus septic piece. Does anyone, I personally think the sewer has to go in. Does anybody have a different opinion than the sewer needs to go in? Because we've got the sewer, the water piece, and then just the general rest of the fees and things that we need to discuss tonight in those three different parts. So if we can knock one of these out real quick, does anyone have an issue with the fact that we'd move forward with the sewer portion? Councilor Lehman?
Well, it depends where however the else shakes out, because if I actually like the option number 4 that the resident came up with. There's only one line that's missing in your table, and that line is the property value of the improvement. So if there's, $30,000 worth of improvement to the property, Scott County's gonna raise the value of the property by that much, and your taxes are gonna go up accordingly. So you missed that line, but it'll be there, trust them. If we're not gonna do that, then I would be in favor of letting them have the new septic systems and wells for the next 30 years and revisiting it. So there, I'm back to just a road.
Okay.
So that's why I want to keep all my options open. I actually had a smaller number in my own mind for this project of what I thought the benefit analysis would be. And when the residents come forward with a larger number than what I had in my mind, I'll take it and run with it, actually. But as far as offsetting the 116,000, I'm in favor of using 10 or 13 SAC credits on this project, and I was a few years ago when Mr. Clay and myself mentioned that during our policy discussion.
It was a completely different reasoning, though, at that time. But
No, the reasoning was to get the systems that were on septic, and I think it was a total of 64 maybe at the time in Shakopee that were actually on septic, and this takes care of a pretty good piece of that. And the other concern I have in this area is that this area, according to Scott County's map, has got the groundwater high risk area where a lot of other areas in Shakopee do not. So that weighs in on me saying, you know what, we've got the opportunity with residents signing a petition to go to that point. I see that as waiving your appeal of assessments at that point, which is a good thing. And I also see that we can buy down to 116 and still apply for the grant along with the SAC credits for these properties. And then, for the difference, is there a benefit to the overall system, especially in the high-risk area? I think there is, from the groundwater standpoint. So it's kind of where I'm thinking. That's where my thought process is at.
that was very definitive of you there.
Well, I mean,
Councilor Lehman.
if it was your house, what would you want to do? If you want to put in a new mound system, the latest and greatest, and you're good for 30 years, and then the city's not going to come back to it for 30 years, and a new well, the property will be good to go for 30 years.
I would want to do option 2.
And I just assume if we've got the property owners on board for that amount, it's not too far off. If we can make it work, then the thing is done completely on all three fronts, you know, the road, the sewer, and the water. So, from my standpoint, then you're not coming back for 50 years. And it's taken out almost 1/5 or 1/6 of the total, outlying septic systems remaining in their area.
Other
Mr. Mayor,
thoughts? Yeah.
I would just want to clarify that the most recent count that we had for septic systems in the city is approximately 800.
800?
800.
We had 60 out in this area,
But throughout the entire city, we're looking at about 800.
and they're,
There are a number of them that are along Marshall Road, just south of where we have sewer and water at this point. And so at some point, those will be an issue as well
Yep.
as the ones that are in eastern Shakopee. It is potentially a large number of septic systems that this city will deal with for a number of years.
The discussion that you're referencing was on for homes where sewer existed, where sewer lines ran by the houses, but they just weren't hooked into it.
right, yep.
And we had talked about using SAC credits to help them hook into it. But I never felt that was okay because everybody else paid to hook into that. And if it could get done, it was their responsibility to do that. And so that was why. So that's why I'm saying this was a different type of discussion than this is.
Entirely, because if you recall, the property out by the cemetery on 16, that property is way up top of the hill,
Mm-hmm.
and the sewer is in 16. So in order to get that sewer all the way up to that house, that's a substantial cost for that property. One that you just can't justify the benefit of doing that on that property.
Right.
So in that case, do you think that property should probably get a couple of bucks help when he's still gonna be paying $50,000-$60,000 to do it?
But that's not what we're talking about here.
And the other property is right over here in town where we couldn't actually get it to it, and it was allowed to build a new septic system. So,
All right. Other thoughts? I have one question for Mr. Loney. With water, if we install just the water transmission line with no service to the houses, that would be, there's no option to hook into that into the future until the road gets reconstructed, correct? There's no,
No, there would be, normally after we rebuild a road, we'd like to not have any street cuts for 5 years. But you could do that afterwards.
so if someone's
Yeah.
somebody's well failed at their home, they could at some point.
One of the things that would have to happen, I think, in that particular case, Shakopee Public Utilities would have to establish a connection charge. So essentially, you would be paying an assessment and connection fees.
Okay.
So, but there is a potential for that, but I'm gonna have Joe kind of relate to that.
Keep in mind the Keep in mind that option 2 with the transmission water main does not include the 8-inch water main north of Spring Lake Lane. So some of the homes wouldn't be fronting a water main in that option. Some would, but some wouldn't.
Councilor Whiting.
Joe, would these houses have access to fire hydrants if they didn't have a water connection charge? I know that was a discussion point.
We're not going to prevent the fire department from using any of the active hydrants in town. There are active hydrants in the neighboring subdivision to the west and to the east, and my understanding is the fire department would connect to those and run hoses. There is one hydrant at the end of Spring Lake Lane at the intersection with Hilldale, because that's the end of the water main now. It's a flushing hydrant. I would imagine if we were to extend the transmission main only down to the county road and east to connect to Glacier, that hydrant would remain there as a potential source for firefighting and flushing.
Follow up.
Please.
With just the 18-inch connection from, that we do from 16 down to Spring Lake Drive, whatever it was, would you still want to do that looping portion of that over to the Glacier Estates?
We wouldn't do anything more than the 18-inch main, and the remaining mains would go in maybe in that 30 years from now when when it's all redone again, when the road's redone and the septic and well issue, or just the well issue comes around again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, at some point, someone needs to make a motion, and then we can discuss the motion.
All right, I'll start.
Council Whiting.
Let's see if I get this right. I will offer,
Mr. Thompson?
Mr. Mayor, Bruce, you're not asked, there's no resolution yet ordering the improvement. You're gonna come back to the council with that at a later
Right.
meeting, correct?
That's a good
So
point. That's a
I
good
think what
point.
Mr. Loney's looking for is direction. Is there 4 votes to go forward with the project? And if so, under what option? And then Mr. Loney will come back to you at the next meeting presumably with a resolution memorializing
To that motion. Yeah, and that's what I'm
Okay.
trying to get to.
yeah.
Yeah. I just need a starting point.
I'll move to
Council
direct
Whiting.
staff to look into option number 1 with extend the connection requirement to 5 years and provide a longer assessment period of 15-year term and pursue any grant opportunities.
All right, so could you restate that real quick?
Direct staff for option number 1 with a 5-year extension on the connection requirements and a 15-year longer assessment term, along with pursuing any grants.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second for that motion? And you're not capping the 28,000.
No, this is just to open the discussion.
Okay, do we have a second? Does anyone just want to second it so we can discuss it and get to another place?
I'll second it to get to a different place.
All right, we have a second. Counselor Mogul. All right, so discussion. Evidently people don't, what's missing from this motion or where are we at?
For me, it's price. 28 is just too much. And I don't know where. I mean, I understand the concern with the fees and setting a precedent, but I think that as a city, we kind of did poor planning around that property and kind of left it as an island. I don't know. Is there a way to get it to that price of 20,000 and just shuffle the fees and things like that? I just,
So you're saying $28,000.
20.
So I'm saying, but $28,000 is too much for the homeowners to bear. Okay. Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, if there's a letter in this packet from the homeowners that says 28,000, it's not 20, it's 28. So, if we could cap it at 28, or as close to 28 as possible, might be 29.
Okay.
Then, I would still do the 5-year connection and the 15-year payback. I could support that.
Councilor Whiting?
Here's my problem with the issue. This is not going to be the first time this is going to come up. This is going to come up time and time again. So now we're asking all the rest of the residents to pay this every time. Every time I got to go pay for somebody else's connection. That's the problem with this. We don't do that on roads. We don't do that in other places. That's the cost. They're not an island. They were an island. They got developed around. Now they have water and sewer from all the other projects. Now it's right there. If we keep walking and, putting pipe past all these little old subdivisions, then we're gonna have some trouble. I mean, how does Spuck get to expand the system and pay for those costs for those water tanks and those lines and wells? So that's my concern there.
Councilor Lehman?
I would leave it as is if it was my house. There's just a good opportunity to take them off, and the reason I would take it off, and I'm supporting taking it off, is because Scott County says that it's a high risk of the drain fields seeping into the groundwater, and that doesn't benefit anybody. There's other areas of town that have septic system that do not have a high risk of seeping into the groundwater. Them systems are not as advantageous to get off onto the system and off of the old methods. They could replace their mound system and be just fine for another 30 years without any risk whatsoever to the groundwater. Very low risk. This area happens to be a higher risk. And it's everybody's groundwater, so that's how I'm looking at it.
Councilor Luce.
I'd be in favor of capping it at the 28, but hopefully being able to get the Met Council's grant money to cover the difference.
What does that
I don't
mean?
believe that, like you, that everybody else should have to pay.
Oh, the grant, yeah.
You know, hopefully the grant will come in and cover it.
Just a clarification that Clean Water Revolving Fund with the MPCA, there's a couple of options with them, not the Met Council. So.
And what kind of money are we talking about that possibly? I mean, are we talking about
I
10
couldn't
bucks
get,
or?
I couldn't get a read for tonight. I mean, we have 65,000 in the project for sanitary sewer. Maybe we can throw some of the street restoration costs in there. Usually it's a 50-50 grant type of grant. So, don't know. We think we stand a good chance because we have 2 failures. I was checking it in. You get points for failures. So if we have more failures of systems out there, that helps our grant application.
Go for it.
Is anybody close? You just raise your hand. It's all right.
But we could, that does help with the grant, and I have to get it in by March 6th, and then we'd find out later this summer if we get it or not.
Bruce, if we direct you to do option, the 20, capping at 28 with the 15 and 5, could you have that information when you bring back the resolution? At what you think?
Sure.
That could,
I mean, if you wanted to order the project, I mean, one of the things at the cap at 28,000, and I know Mr. Thompson look at me like, but if we get that, we'd want a waiver, we'd want an assessment agreement, that there would be no appeals of assessment, because we're not gonna grant some different cost mechanism and then have to fight later, because we'd want to take care of that. So we could bring back a resolution. I mean, whatever you want to cap it at, you cap it at. Whatever if we get some money savings, I think we should get it, because we're already over the limit. Unless we get such a grant that we actually cover the connection fees and the assessment. But I don't think we're gonna get that much.
Okay.
You can look at some of the options if you want. The city SAC, that's an easy one if you wanna look at that. Met SAC, I know that's been mentioned. And the stormwater, if we do have to use it, you could say you could use storm drainage funds, but that's for our side. I don't know if there's anything from Shakopee Public Utilities. That's the big cost of this whole project. That's the real kahuna on this whole thing. You know, and we haven't asked that. Should they be sharing in this cost sharing is all.
Councilor Luce had a question first.
Being that the groundwater is so close or it's so vulnerable in that area, I was wondering if Mr. Adams would have any idea of what the potential for contamination is.
Well, you can speak to that.
I'm not exactly qualified to speak to that directly, but I can say because of natural features like the Savage Fen and Boiling Springs and Eagle Creek and Deans Lake, the DNR has deemed that we cannot drill municipal wells east of County Road 83. We have one site in what was called the Church Edition approved as a well site. It's right at County Road 83. And we have to agree to drill that well. We have to put in a monitoring well nearby, and whether we'd get permission to drill a second well, because we usually pair wells. But we can't drill any wells anywhere near this site. The area that was shown on the map that is vulnerable to groundwater contamination is also lining up with the barrier, the underground barrier that exists between portions of the aquifer. So we have to drill west of that barrier, and we can't drill east. That's why this transmission line is important to the water utility, because we put 2 large ground storage tanks on County Road 18 that total 5 million gallons, but we can't have any wells closer than County Road 83. So the 18-inch transmission main in the County Road 16 corridor is one of only 3 connections. We have one along 101 and we have one through the Southbridge area, the 169 corridor, but that's the missing link in order to move the water from the production area west to the storage area east and back and forth. That's what this transmission main functions as. But there's a benefit to the groundwater, and anyone who has a private well that's in that area is going to benefit from not having contamination, obviously, in that portion of the aquifer. It really doesn't affect the municipal water supply, in my uneducated, unexpert opinion, because our nearest well is going to be more than 2 miles away.
Will the DNR have any issue with so many wells out there sometime in the future as they, and the Met Council and everybody continues to crack down on groundwater use?
Well, they don't allow municipal well because they're high volume wells, 1,000 GPM, 1,200 GPM.
I know I'm talking about these kinds of wells though.
But
that
these
tend to
private
die.
wells, there's been some added in that area of town since they put the ban on ours. But, you know, you're talking about a household well. It's not very high volume and they're scattered around.
Okay. Councilor Lehman.
Is there not a benefit to the utility to Spuck to put this line in that runs from the west to the east to your storage tanks?
Yes, and the benefit is, as I described, and Spuck is picking up a large share of the water main cost in that oversizing. We're also, to help this project financially be viable, we're picking up the majority of the cost of the other 8-inch lateral line running east to Glacier Estates.
Okay, I thought that line was included in the estimate.
There's costs in there, but per the feasibility report that was previously reviewed, it was noted that the part of the assessment to the homeowners was limited to $12,000 total out of $107,000 estimated cost. So Spuck was agreeing to pick up $95,000 of that 8-inch water main.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor for option 1 with a 15-year term. Thank you, Mr. Adams. 5 years to hook up and go after additional grants. Is that correct?
You had the 15-year term in there?
Yep.
It was actually capped, I think.
No, it was not capped.
Okay.
The motion.
Yep, not the
Right.
motion is not capped.
Who made that motion?
It was
And seconded by Kathy?
yes. For point of discussion. So, any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Does not pass with councilors Luce. I know. Yeah, Luce, Mokel, Lehman, and Tabke in dissent. So do we have another crack at it? I just want to say before we go, I'm very much in favor of option 2. It eliminates as we move these forward, we're going to have dozens of these that come through over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years to the city, which therefore equates to millions of dollars if they all continue to be at this same level. And if we're subsidizing this at $10,000 to $15,000 per home for getting water, if there's a good solution like this, I think, which would give sewer, which is really important to the entire community to have sewer there, as well as the homeowners. Let them continue to use their wells, which in that area, which I don't have a problem with, that they're not impacting the groundwater. And we can get the project done around the costs that we anticipate without a huge burden on the remainder of the city. I'm okay with that piece. Just want to toss that out there that's what I think could be a good option to meet in the middle for things. So, Councilor Lehman.
So option 2, there would be no assessment for the water portion to these properties because they wouldn't be benefiting from it?
Correct. So the assessments are $78,000 for street, $65,000 for sanitary, $13,000 for storm, and $130,000 for water is the way everything cracks out here. So this piece right there.
Let's see the individual.
Councilor Whiting.
Here's the problem with that is how do you, when you're doing the sewer charges, they look at the well. They'd have to have another meter on their well, so there's another charge in there to to charge, and Bruce can correct me on that.
Mr. Loney?
Mayor, members of the council, Council Whiting, yeah, one of the things we did put in here is a water meter installation of $235.
Oh, yeah.
So there would have to be a water meter that we'd have to read. I mean, just want to make a point, ideally, that's why this is a tough project. Ideally, you'd always want to have sewer and water, there's no question. If the costs, you know, it's a balancing act. Everybody wants sewer and water over there. Buck even said they want sewer and water in the area. I think we'd want to see sewer and water here, so it's really the cost. Who picks up that cost? Where's that at? Or option two, that's why I presented option two as a, if that isn't something the council can agree on, then option two at least gets people off the septic system. Two of them have to replace them. Spuck gets their 18-inch water transmission line through, they get a new street, and they would have to live on their wells, but they would be hooked up to sewer.
And don't get me wrong by any means, number one would be my preferred option if it didn't cost an arm and a leg to get done. I mean, I think that would be the right thing to do, so as it goes forward, going on to sewer and water, I think it's very clear that is the good thing to do, but in this case, there aren't enough people to spread the cost out over, so I think it's okay to make a few concessions to figure out how to make that work feasibly. Councilor Lehman.
The concern with option two, and I might be wrong, I'll have to ask the utilities, but they won't put in that 8-inch east-west lateral. And then if somebody does want to put in city water, they're going to tear up the street to do it. Or, yeah, they're going to tear up the street to get to the water. They're not going to meet the looping requirements, so now what happens with the 8-inch lateral? Does that have to be put in? And if it does, now it's a substantial cost to that property owner. So then you're going to have to get multiples together to do it to make it cost effective, which brings us back to option one.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Mayor,
Bruce got his hand up.
Yeah.
Mayor, members of the council, Council Lehman, one thing to talk with Pete Schmidt of Scott County, when you bring in the sewer and you eliminate the septic system, you free up much of the land for setbacks to drill another well, if they need another well.
Okay.
Wells can go a lot longer sometimes. I mean, this is not, again, ideal, but you then open up to meet setbacks for wells. If you have another septic system, you put another septic system, now your chances of getting another well with all the setback requirements are very minimized. So now you're really limiting your lot. Taking out the septic frees up much of the land for another well, if that's the way we go.
Mr. Thompson.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members, this is a policy decision for the council, but I just want to point out two things. Option two also does not, you're not setting any precedent. You're charging the full fees, you're charging the full assessments, and there isn't any precedent being set here for a future, other than the fact you're not putting in sanitary sewer, but that's just because of the complexity of this project. Plus, water, yes. Plus, based on the analysis, the total cost to the property owner, without waiving any cost, is less than the appraiser estimated the increase in value. He's still she's still estimating a $20,000 increase in value to the property, just with water and the street, and the total cost is $19,785. So
This was sewer in the street.
yeah, I'm sorry. With sanitary sewer in the street and not
Okay.
the water. So that's just two things. It's not a precedent, and the benefit that they get to that property does support all of the costs that they'd have to pay.
Okay.
For your information.
All right. So we're back. Councilor Luce.
If we go with option two, Mr. Loney, is it possible still to go look for a grant, and if we get a grant, go back to option one?
Anything's possible.
That's why we love you, Bruce.
I mean, if you order option two, we would probably, we can wait till we hear the grant. I mean, it might be a follow-up motion. But the grant probably will not, we can always do that. We can always come back and, we can send a letter to the residents, there are only 10 households. If it made a substantial difference and they really wanted to have sewer and water, we can always bring that back. But once you order the project tonight, you're ordering the project, we can always come back with a revision to that project. Because this will not be built this year. We're looking at next year. We do have to acquire some property even for the street improvement, so it's not, and we could get it ready for next year. So it is a yes. The answer is yes, we could do that.
Can I ask a question? The public hearing is closed, but is there anybody out there that is vehemently opposed to going with the second option of sewer without water hookups? And if there is, I would like to understand why. And I'm saying vehemently opposed. Got to come up. Sorry.
Just a question with what was just discussed. I mean, for us as homeowners, would that require then digging up our yard twice and having a plumber come back out twice, an additional cost on top of that? Because right now, if we connect to, say, water and septic, I mean, we come out, have the plumber dig it once, put in both lines.
Are you talking about the grant, of waiting for the grant, or?
No, yeah, if that was the case, Mayor.
No, it would not. It would be, the project gets done in 2016, and we'll know by then, we'll know in the near future as to what needs to get done.
Just to clarify, I think what Brandon's saying, whatever project we do, if it's just sewer only, he'd have a sewer connection, digs up the yard. If we come back and say, wow, we got some more money, and we can do a sewer and water, yes, you'd dig it up one more time. But you'd know once and for all which way we're going.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, I was still looking
Thank you,
for,
sir.
I was still looking for a clarification from the utilities about the loop room requirement if we don't put water in and somebody wants to put water in later.
If you do option 2 and the transmission water mains put in, your question is,
Somebody 5 years later wants to put city water on their property.
well, I think the commission's already set the precedent in another subdivision where water main was put past it, but it wasn't a project that the city was doing and assessing for the benefit. It was only a part of the water system required to serve that subdivision. So it's kind of akin to that situation where the water main goes partially through, but not all of the water mains put in that's needed to be put in. And when that happened, what the commission did, on the advice or input from Mr. Thompson, there's another statute in state law that allows for water utility to adopt a special connection charge. So what we did was, or the commission did, was they adopted a policy for those situations that they would establish what would have been the lateral water main cost assessed to the benefiting properties for such a project. And the commission would record that figure then, and if someone in the future came in and wanted to get water service, they would have to, one, some of these lots wouldn't have a water main fronting them, so they wouldn't be able to connect. Those that did, we'd have to have that special connection fee paid in addition to the trunk water charge and the regular connection charge. And if any of the, if several of them wanted to, we'd probably be looking at telling them, you need to put these other water mains in at 100% your cost, because there's no oversizing involved.
So basically, if we make this decision, people are going to be on wells for the next 30 years.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm,
my own opinion, if you do option 2, I don't know that anybody would ever be on city water. It'd be easier, based on what Bruce said, for them to just do another well.
thank you. So we're back needing another motion. Councilor Whiting?
I'm not gonna make that motion, but I just think this is, you know, I hate the cost that's involved. But to put in sewer without water, and it's right there, that sets the wrong precedent. That takes money out of Spuck's pocket to help with the water towers, with the transmission lines, with the pumps. That's the wrong direction. Unfortunately, because it's a big chunk of money, but it's wrong.
Councilor Luce?
I got a question for Mr. Adams on, if they keep their well for watering their lawns, is that possible? I've heard that in the past was allowed.
Yes, let me address that, because I think there was a little miscommunication on my part with the residents on that. What I was referring to was one commissioner made a comment and it wasn't the consensus of the commission, it wasn't fully discussed. But one commissioner made the comment that if the project went forward and the commission was asked to accept less than their standard fees from the neighborhood because of some negotiated deal, and contribute more than they'd already agreed to for the water pipes, then to recover that cost, it would only be fair to require the customers to use city water, including for their irrigation. So if option one went forward with or without your grant and the regular fees applied, then that wouldn't be the case. And like other cases, the commission, the utilities manager would grant permission to maintain your private well, as long as you followed the protocol with separation of pipes. Does that clarify that?
Yeah, I was aware of it. I just wanted to make sure we were still on that process.
Sure.
All right. Councilor Mokel.
I'm just gonna take a shot in the dark and make a motion for option number 2, to reconstruct the street for the 20,000.
For the 20,000, what do you mean by that?
So the special benefit, option 2, the reconstruct the
Okay.
street, the install the city water,
City sewer
or city
Yeah.
sewer.
and a water transmission
Yes,
line, no
thank you.
services.
All right. Do we have a second for that motion? Do we have a second? I would second it, but I can't. All right. Dies for lack of a second. Councilor Lehman.
I'll try my failing hand. Option number 1, 5-year connection, window, 15-year payback, capped as close to 28 as possible, with option 2 being a fallback.
Do we have, so we have a motion on the floor, 15-year payback,
5-year connection.
5-year connection, $28,000 cap.
Yep.
With option 1. Do we have a second for that?
I'm gonna second that to ask a question.
Seconded by Councilor Whiting. Discussion,
Okay.
Councilor Whiting.
How do you add option 2 as a fallback? I don't
Well,
understand that.
If the grant doesn't come through, and if we apply the Met Council sewer credits and the grant, where does that get us to? And if this body is not comfortable with where we're at, then we can't do it. And we're gonna have to go to option 2.
Listen, we have to stop discussing the grant because it doesn't
Yep,
matter.
right.
The grant,
Yeah.
it's fake money that if it comes in, that's great.
Yeah.
But we have to stop discussing the grant because we have no information, we can't control it, we can't do anything about it. So we need to throw the grant out of the discussion.
All right, well, I'll just go with option 1 then, as stated.
Okay?
Oh, the other thing in that motion would be that it would require a waiver of assessment of bill from the property owners.
I accept that.
All right, so a waiver of assessment as well. So we have a motion on the floor.
Oh,
No,
Oh.
just, go ahead, Mr. Mayor, I didn't want to interrupt you.
I was going to recap what the motion on the floor was. That it's a 15-year payback, 5 years to connect, $28,000 cap and a waiver of assessment.
Appeal.
So
Not waiving the assessment.
a waiver of appeal of assessment. Thank you
Right,
for the
right.
clarification
Don't you also have an option to fall back to 2?
Well, I took that out.
there.
that's what it'll be anyway.
Mr. Mayor, just so it's
Sir.
clear on this, the cap of 28 is the capping to the property owners, the total cost, including the assessments and hookup charges of $28,000. Just so you know what might be the outcome of that, if the fees aren't changed, either by the council or by SPUC, and they have to pay the total fees, then your assessment will be 14,000. It'll be something less than 28 in order to cap it at 28. So what might be adjusted at the end of the day here might not be the fees, it might be your assessments. That's all I'm pointing out.
But their total cost.
That's right.
That's right. Yep.
That's Whiting.
Mr. Thompson, what, if we do this, we have another project like this in a year or two, what is the precedent we set here? capping it? Is it just this one time only? Or
Well, Mr. Mayor, from a legal perspective, I'm not that concerned about this being a legal precedent because this is a very unique situation. I understand from a practical and a political perspective, that's a little different issue. But I suspect at the end of the day here, what's gonna happen if this ultimately goes through is it's not the fees that are gonna be adjusted. It's gonna be your assessments. And you're gonna be assessing lower than what the appraisal supports, but there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to support the maximum amount that your appraisal comes back at. But at the end of the day, I think that's what you're gonna be doing. Instead of assessing 28,000, you're gonna be assessing something lower than that, and they're gonna end up paying all the fees. So there wouldn't be any precedent with respect to paying the fees, I suspect, because I don't think those are gonna change very much.
Well, and if we put a Met Council SAC credit that we have on each one of these properties, you're reducing the fee portion by the 2,400 or whatever it is, and which allows you to increase the assessment portion on that property by 24. So, so you're getting back some of that cost.
Well, that's what I was asking earlier, if we could adjust the numbers somehow, so
Staff can do that.
But
Lewis was
changing
next.
the fees is very much precedent issues, in my opinion. That's a much bigger precedent
But
issue
we're
than.
not changing the fees.
But that's what we're saying is if
No,
we reduce-
that's,
No.
Jim just explained that.
But what you were, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry. Councilor Luce.
I didn't have my hand.
Oh, he said you had something else to say.
Thought he had his hand up.
Nope.
All right.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor with a 5-year payback. I hope everyone's enjoying the substantive big discussion that we're having tonight about your 10 homes. It is an important thing, and it takes a while sometimes. So thank you for being here with us. So we have motion second on the floor for 5-year hookup, 15-year payback, $28,000 cap, and waiver of appeal assessment that way. Councilor Whiting.
last comment, I think this is probably the best way to go. It gets the water, the sewer, and the fees down. So, it's not ideal, because the city's gonna have to pay, but, it gets the project done.
And how much do we think the city's going to have to pay?
126,000.
Yeah.
126,000.
Except we're gonna jack their water rates way up. to cover it.
That's not us, that's not us.
Just kidding.
He doesn't have that authority.
Sewer rates, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, sewer.
Jeez.
Most expensive sewer in town.
All right, so we have motion second on the floor. Any further discussion on it? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nay. Passes 4-1 with Tabke in dissent. So we have, just to recap for everybody, we've gone with option 1, which is full sewer and water and road reconstruction with a 5-year connect. You have to connect within 5 years for that project. 15-year payback, $28,000 cap for the homeowners, and that all has to be figured out as to how exactly we do that at this point. And then also you must sign a waiver that you will not appeal your assessments for there. So that's where we've ended up, and it will come back to us for official action when, Mr. Loney?
I guess we could bring it back to next council meeting or two, or,
You don't need to
Yeah.
give me a specific date, just in the next month?
yeah,
two?
yeah, the next regular
Yes.
meeting without the workshop.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, sir. Councilor Lehman,
Motion for a 10-minute recess.
A second?
motion is seconded for recess. All right, 10-minute recess. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We in recess for 10 minutes. reconvenes Shakopee City Council meeting, and we're gonna do a little agenda hopping, and we're gonna move to item number 10F1, the results of the community survey now, and Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the council will recall, late last fall, the city decided to hire the firm of Morris Leatherman to conduct a community survey. It's a general purpose survey. It covered a lot of different topics for the city. And here tonight to present you with the results of the survey is Mr. Peter Leatherman.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back here with you. I think it was back before Christmas when I came out and sat down with you, and we looked over the survey draft to make sure you were comfortable with the questions we were answering or asking the community. And tonight I'm here to present the community's responses to those questions that you decided to ask them. Just to refresh everybody's memory on what we did, we conducted the field work the middle of December. It took about 2 weeks to conduct the field work. The average interviewer took 32 minutes on the phone with us to go through the entire survey. We had 15% of your community stay on the phone with us for over 1 hour. Once they realized we weren't going to sell them anything and that this was community driven, it was for the city of Shakopee, they were more than willing to sit on the phone with us and give us their opinions. The refusal rate was 4.5%, the people that we could not contact, could not get a hold of. And in looking at the demographics of the survey against the 2010 census and then updates since 2010, we feel we have a very representative sample at all the key demographics, households with children, renters, ethnicity, everything like that. The cell phones, we had 35% of the sample took the telephone survey on their cell phone. And just a reminder, the statistical caveat is the results are projectable to within plus or minus 5% in 95 out of 100 cases. So with that, the survey was longer. I do have a long presentation. I'm going to go through the charts. I'll talk about comparatives that we have if we've asked them in similar communities. We do 2 metro surveys every year in the spring and the fall on a lot of these questions to enhance our database so that we can make comparisons to you. We don't have a trend to look at here. This kind of sets the baseline for you, so we don't know where you were in the past on a lot of these questions, but we know where you are now and we know how that compares. What I would say is if you have questions on a specific slide, stop me on the slide, since there's 51 of them, and I'd hate to say go back to slide 12 when I'm on 48. So feel free to interrupt me at any point as I go through. We start off the survey asking for a general quality of life rating. We do this in every community that we work with. We haven't talked about any issues, and it's intentional that this is up front. This is their gut level, how they feel the quality of life in Shakopee is. You can see we have 93% that rated it excellent or good, 7% only fair, and nobody said poor. The key on this in differentiating between suburbs is really the excellent. This can vary anywhere from 6% up to 70%. The 27% places you within the top third. The average on this is about 20% of a community saying it's excellent. So you're above the norm on it. Now, when people talk about the quality of life, what are they thinking about? The next question we ask, what do they like most about the city? This is their core value. And your community views itself very much like a small town. It is a suburb, but it has small town values. 23% said first off, it is the small town feel we have here. 18% pointed to their neighborhood or their housing. 15% quiet, 14% said the friendly people. Safety, sense of community, location, schools, parks, and trails trailed off after that. You really don't have a tension here. A lot of the third and exurban ring suburbs have a tension between people talking about amenities and what they like most being these suburban things. I'm close to shopping, I'm close to my job, the convenient location, and then the small town feel and the quiet and the friendly people and everything. You really do have a pronounced tilt towards it in the minds of residents here, where they do appreciate the small town feel and all those attributes that go with it in the community. What's the most serious issue facing the community? First off, we'll go to the bottom. 27% said there's nothing. There's no problems here whatsoever. This is different than unsure. We flushed this out. Now, are you saying that there's nothing because you can't think of anything, or there just really is nothing going on here? That's a problem. And these are hard and fast, and we consider these your boosters. This really varies from community to community, the amount of boosterism, but the average across Metro right now is about 10 to 12%. So you're running 2 to 2.5 times higher in the booster level on this question. What did people point to? First off, this is an open-ended question, and so we cut the threshold. If you have over 30% coalescing around one response, that's a major issue in a community. You don't have that. You don't have anything at 20%. You do have 17% at growth. And actually, when you think about it, you pair that back to what they value. That shows then why they rated the quality of life here so well. You've done a good job in balancing growth. At the peak of some suburbs, if you Woodbury years ago, this growth would be 40 to 45%. At the height of their growth period is the most serious issue facing the community. So you've done a nice job in balancing growth. We'll talk a little bit about some amenities that people would like to see in the community later on. What else did they point to? School facilities. Obviously, that's an issue in the community, has been over the last couple of years. So it's kind of a singular dot in time. We don't know where those people would go if the referendum is successful this year. Will they go into nothing? Will they pick another issue as serious in the community? We don't know that. But 8% of the community, or 12% of the community as a whole felt that, and overwhelmingly they were households with children. Taxes, 11% pointed to that as the most serious issue. Actually low in comparison across Metro. In the fall survey, the most serious issue facing the community, taxes came in at about 20%. So you're about half the level of concern, and we'll look at taxes specifically and residents' viewpoints on it. And then crime, right at the Metro average, about 10% concern across most suburban communities. And then everything goes then down to single digits. Issues on council, poor spending, lack of businesses, scattered. Strength of community ID, the connectedness that they feel in this community. And you've done a nice job with this. 83% rated excellent or good, 17% only fair, 1% said poor. The 21% excellent is right about the norm on it. What really varies is the good to the only fair. A lot of Minnesotans have a tendency that there's always room for improvement. And so, and that's why we do put the word only in front of the word fair on this scale, because we want to force it into a negative position. It's not an average position. And for the most part, your residents tip in favor of in the favorable position to good, with over 4 out of 5 saying that you're doing an excellent job on the strength of community identity. Direction of the city. Overall, do you feel the city is going in the right direction? 4 out of 5 agree, 17% said we're on track. Going back into the data to that 17%, what did they say was the most serious issue? It was growth. That was the predominant issue that drove them to say the city is on the wrong track. This rating puts you within the top quartile, top 25%. The average on this is about 70% across Metro. The city portion of property taxes. We saw in the earlier open-ended question, the most serious issue, 11% pointed to it. Now we ask them, tell us if they're very high, somewhat high, about average, low, or unsure. First off, you had 2% that said low. It's unusual to have anybody say low for property taxes in the past, well, I've been doing this 20 years. But what we're looking for here is the difference between the combined high and the average to classify a city where the tax level, where the folks are in their property taxes. You have 43% in the high category, you have 46% in the about average. This places you, we would categorize the city as a benign tax climate. What's a hostile tax climate? Over the past couple years, we've had cities and school districts, we asked it in both local governments that we work with, the very high and somewhat high combined at 70%. So, and then your about average is down at 20%. You have a balance here of where folks are on this. It's a real split in the community, but tax hostility, and only less than 10% said they were very high. So we would categorize this as a benign tax climate. Does this mean they'll skip it to every and applaud every tax increase? No, that's not the case. We asked them a general question: would you support a tax increase to maintain city services at their current level? You actually have a majority, 53% saying they would, 39% opposed, and 8% wanted more information about what would be cut if they didn't give you the property tax increase. Our phoners don't have that information, so they remained unsure. This really does vary across the metro area. With the recession about 6 years ago, this dropped off. It was down about 30% was the average. It is unique. You're probably probably 25% of communities actually have an outright majority supporting a property tax increase right now to maintain city services. What about enhancing them? No, they're not interested in that. 30% said they would support a property tax increase to enhance or improve city services. 64% would oppose. So you can kind of see the tension then between the very high or in the somewhat high category and the about average in the community. They are willing to look at maintenance. Enhancement will be more difficult. There are things that we talked about, especially park and rec specific items, that there is interest in use of city funding for. It'll just depend on the cost. The question where the rubber hits the road for residents is always, when you consider your city services you receive and the property taxes you pay, how do you rate that value? 77% rated it excellent or good, 20% rated it only fair or poor. It gives you about a 4-to-1 ratio, places you within the top quartile across the metro area. So you do have residents seeing a value for the tax dollars they're spending in the community. How do they rate the city services? We went through this list and asked them to give it an excellent, good, only fair or poor. This collapses down the excellent and good into the blue, the only fair and poor into the red. Looking for a sea of blue instead of a red riptide. And what we have is mainly that across this chart. A few things to point to. There's two that have higher levels of unfavorable ratings. The first, you're doing a better job than the metro. The other one, a little bit lower. City street repair and maintenance. This is always an Achilles heel for every city. The average on this across metro is 50% favorable, 50% negative. So you're actually running about 20 points higher in the minds of residents in the job you're doing in maintaining the city streets. The other one, the street lighting, you're actually below the norm on that. We consider this to be a universal constant in the metro, that 80% feel that the street lighting is adequate, 20% feel it's not adequate enough. You actually have 12 points higher on this. Some of the side comments that people mentioned, they're not coded and collapsed out into categories, but it seemed to be an equal measure. You know, people talking about there's too many streetlights, there's one outside my house, it bothers my kids when they sleep. The other one is there's not enough. And a lot of communities have that tension of too many versus too much on it. So it'd be one thing we flag on it. Everything else falls within the norms that we would expect. And when you relate it back then to the overall value that they see for the services provided, they rate you very highly. Garbage recycling and pickup, we tested this, gave them the caveat that you had switched services. It's been a successful switchover in the minds of residents. 81% rated it excellent or good, 17% only fair or poor. About the average on any garbage pickup or recycling pickup that we test is about a 4 out of 5 residents are happy with it. 20% can see room for improvement on it. Code enforcement. We tested, we have 6 categories here. We asked them, is the city too tough, about right, or not tough enough? First off, the red bars, you can see overwhelming majority say you're doing about the right amount on on each of these individual code enforcements. Are you doing too much? Very, very little in the too much category. The 5% improper storage bins, those people had discussions with somebody about the improper storage of bins, and it was a very hot topic for them. They actually ended up being on the phone with us for over an hour. There are a couple areas, though, and it kind of coalesces around the residential home maintenance. And you do have weeds and tall grass, junk cars, messy yards, being at that 20 to 25% range. A little bit higher, we typically see this about 15%. Not a major concern, but something to think about as you plan for the future. The other thing is noise, and that varies all over the place. This one, though, your noise is based on what blocked me from coming in here 5 minutes earlier was the train, and that's what people talked about. So the noise is kind of a unique response, I think, to the city itself, just because of the train issue.
Hang on a second.
Yep.
The noise issue, we get a lot of complaints on certain times of year when certain events are happening.
You had people talk about loud neighbors, you had people talk about fireworks, those sorts of things also.
Speaking of the Warped Tour.
I don't remember seeing any of
Concert
that in
noise?
the side, the concert event.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing anybody talk about that.
Okay.
The Survey Eden Prairie.
Right, there you go.
Do residents support a more active approach to city code enforcement? We kind of told them how you do it now, and would they like you to take a more active approach? You have a majority in the community that would like the city to go in this route. 56% favored it, 40% opposed it. If you look at the intensity on it, a little more tilted to those strongly favoring it. Who were those that were strongly favoring it? If I'll just flip back to this chart, it was those that talked about weeds and tall grass and messy yards. They were more likely to strongly favor a more proactive approach in city code enforcement. The safety issue in the city. We can go through these charts fairly rapidly. Overall, people do feel safe here. 93% say yes, they feel safe in the city. 6% say no, they don't. That is the average for the third ring and exurban communities, about 95-5. Do they feel safe walking alone at night in the neighborhood? 80-20, also right at the norm. We always look to make sure that who's in that 19%, and there are two typical groups in the 19% that answer this across the metro area. They tend to be women, and they tend to be over 55 years old. More likely, it's not so much a city thing, it's just an overall safety thing in their minds. The amount of neighborhood patrolling. And then the next chart, the amount of neighborhood traffic enforcement, you have 80% saying about right, 20% not enough, right at the norm. 20% in every community thinks you can't do enough neighborhood patrolling and traffic enforcement. And the 2% that said too much on both of these questions had a traffic ticket or indicated that there was some sort of violation that caused them to say too much on it. So the police is viewed very favorably as doing the right amount of traffic enforcement and neighborhood patrolling. How serious is traffic speeding in the community? Right at the average in the metro, a third in the very serious and somewhat serious, and 68% in the not at all. When we look into the demographics a little further, and we'll break it out in the report, and we can talk about, are there any sort of precincts in the community that has higher levels of folks saying that it's very serious or somewhat serious? And stop sign violations mirrors traffic speeding. 27% very or somewhat serious, and 73% not too serious or not at all serious. What is the greatest public safety concern in the minds of residents? 15% go to the bottom of the chart, said there are no concerns. None of these are a serious concern in their minds. So 1 in 7 in the community fall into that category. What do those that give an answer to? They pointed to two things, and they kind of intermingled them in a lot of the discussion on the survey, was drugs and it was youth crimes and vandalism. 25% and 19% in those categories respectively. That is not atypical right now, especially in the southern metro. The drugs as the top public safety concern tends to be in the 20 to 30% range right now, and it tends to be then followed by youth crimes and vandalism. Residential crimes comes next. Traffic speeding, we saw it's not that great of a concern already in the previous chart, ranks fourth. Business crimes, and very little concern about identity theft or violent crime in the community. The park and recreation system. This chart, we asked folks to give ratings on, first half they had to tell us if they've used the facility, and if they've used it, how would they rate it. The bars don't add up to go over to 100% because these are the users only. So it's giving you the total usership. 67% of the community had indicated they'd been in the community center. 41% the ice arena. As you can see, you have a sea of blue on it. Very high ratings, you have very high usership in comparison to the metro, and a little bit higher when we compare it against those of similar demographics. A younger community, more households with children. You're doing a very good job, especially on the larger community parks and the smaller neighborhood parks. Trails, the 10% negative on that talked about the plowing and the maintenance of the trails. Going back to the previous chart on city services. This chart combines 4 questions. First off, we asked, does the facilities in the community meet the needs of your household? 95% said they did. We asked, does your household or members of your household participate in city programs? 23% indicated they had. It's a little bit below average across Metro. We tend to see that in the 28 to 32% range. Does the city programming meet the needs of your household? Yes, it does, 95 to 5. Do you leave the city to recreate? 31% said yes, they did. 69% said no, they didn't. You actually have a stronger pull here. The average on the no, they don't leave the community tends to be about 55%. So you're keeping a lot more people here with the recreational facilities you offer than a lot of other communities where they choose to leave to recreate elsewhere. We asked a series of funding, potential offerings for funding for Park and Rec. And this wasn't grounded in an actual dollar amount, but we did ask them, would you support the use of city funding for this? What led the list was an indoor pool and aquatic facility. 2/3 supported it, followed by a fitness center expansion, 63 to 36, senior center, 58 to 39, and the indoor playground at 53-46. All the others did register then a majority against in concept. Now, in testing in concept is different than testing specifics. And the key question is always going to be how much is it going to cost and what's it going to look like. So you do have 2 projects that go above 60% on it that we would say has a lot of support in the community and would warrant more discussion of details. The other things, it will all depend about what's included and how much it costs. We talked about city repurposing the Central Family Center, and you had a strong majority in support of this, 59%. 35% opposed and 7% were unsure. If you look though at the intensity, it's even. You have strong support at 14%, strong opposition at 15%. The key on it then is going to be the right-hand chart, and that is our let's make a deal question, where we ask them, how much would you be willing to see your property tax increase for that purpose? First off, we had 43% that said that nothing. That they don't support it, and they don't want to see a property tax increase for it. The overall acceptable property tax increase is $2.61 a year, roughly $30, or $2.61 a month, or roughly $30 a year. In their minds would be reasonable in the general discussion that we had on this topic. We asked them about moving City Hall and gave them a location. 56% supported, 37% opposed. Intensity, pretty equal on it. Not a lot of intensity, a lot of the soft support, soft opposition on it. So folks are looking for more detail, but the community does tilt in favor of looking at moving City Hall.
Is there any why to that one?
I don't think we followed up with the why. Let me double check that.
Okay.
No, we did not follow that up.
Okay.
We asked 2 questions on the reduction of railroad noise. You have a split in the community, whether they think that these are, whether they support or oppose them. We talked about turning restrictions on Second Avenue and up to 3 street closures. 48% support the turning restrictions, 51% up to 3 street closures, and this was driven by geography. The further away you were from it, the more likely you were to oppose it, because it might inconvenience you when you came down to downtown. Support was higher amongst those that are closer to the railroad tracks. Do they leave the city of Shakopee for a job? 39% said they do, 8% said no, they have a home office, and 53% said no, they were retired, they're working from home, or they work in the city of Shakopee. Of that, of the 40% that leave the city, where are they going? 17% go to Minneapolis, 14% go to Bloomington Edina corridor, 13% Burnsville, 11% Eden Prairie, 8%, wow, drive to St. Paul, and 8% work in Prior Lake is how it breaks out. Amongst those that leave, what's their average commute time? The average commute time is 24 minutes. And which is, when we look at the area you are in relationship to a lot of job centers, is actually a pretty good commute time. There are some, I live in the city of Champlin, and I believe last time that survey, the average commute time was over 30 minutes for folks. So you can see very few people have a commute time of 5 minutes or less. It all tends to clump in the 16 to 30 minute range.
With this data, do we know how many people work, what percentage work in the city?
We didn't separate it out that way. We were looking at those leaving the city and their behaviors.
I just didn't know if that no section, if that was.
No, we separated out, do they have a home, do they work at a home office?
Okay, got it.
How do they rate the ease of getting to work? With a 24-minute commute time, they're fairly satisfied with that. It probably was in the calculation they made when they decided to move to the city, that if they're going to go outside the city for work, it's going to be a longer commute time, with 2/3 saying it's excellent or good, 27% saying only fair, and only 4% saying that it was poor. Public transit, you're right at about the norm on this is about 12% in any community saying that they actually regularly ride public transit. What does regularly mean? It varies in the minds of residents, but it tends to be about 12%, and you're right at that. Familiarity with MVTA, 50% are aware of it, 50% are not aware of it. So there would be potential room for growth on the awareness and the marketing of MVTA in the city of Shakopee. We did put a little statement in there, I think, from our meeting saying, kind of thinking about the ease of travel in the city, not thinking about all the street reconstruction projects that have been happening, since they are, you know, instances in time. And overall, people do rate the ease of getting around here very, very well. 84% rated it excellent, good. Only 15% only fair or poor. This places you within the top 20% of communities for intra-city travel, is what we call it. So I think, I don't know if that statement impacted it at all, but residents don't see it as a big problem moving around this city. When I talked about growth earlier, you're kind of, you had the small town feel and as the major attribute that people value here, and then growth as attention is a most serious issue. But there are some things that people want more of, and it's what we can consider, we call the secondary growth cycle. Basically, first cycle growth is all housing, bring the people here. The secondary growth is now give them the amenities that they want around it. And you're very typical on the growth scale for this. Service establishments are not seen as having a deficit here, but retail shopping opportunities, entertainment establishments, and dining establishments all register 35 to 44% saying there's not enough. We'll get into a little more specifics on what they're looking for, especially on retail and restaurants. What's their principal shopping area? The Target in Shakopee, followed by the Walmart in Shakopee, and the Cub in Shakopee, and then everything else falls off. The 5% said the Eden Prairie Mall. The 10% scattered are all the others that are going outside the city. People talked about Southdale. They talked about Ridgedale. You had 2% that were going to the Mall of America. All of those sorts of things. But what do residents view as their principal retail shopping area? 85% consider it something in the city of Shakopee. What percent of their retail shopping dollar is spent in Shakopee? 46% is average. Nobody spends nothing here. They all spend something here. It just varies between 1 and over 75%. But the typical resident spends roughly half their retail dollar in the city of Shakopee. The other half goes outside the city of Shakopee.
How does that rate with other cities?
This whole section really varies based on what the amenities the community has. I mean, if you think about Minnetonka is going to be very different from Champlin, just in what they have. So it does vary. I would say for Third Ring and Exurban, you have a lot more people shopping here than you do leaving in comparison to similar communities on that ring. Frequency of shopping, making purchases in the city of Shakopee, the average person buys something in the city about once every 4 days. A quarter of them are shopping daily, 46% weekly, and then everything else falls off. What sort of retail stores would they like you to attract? We kind of clustered this. We asked a general question, the type, and then if they gave us a type, specific stores that you're interested in. 21% of the sample indicated they wanted a grocery store, 1 in 5. What sort of names did they give us for grocery stores? They talked about Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, and Aldi's. 11% pointed to department stores, Sears, JCPenney's, Macy's, and Herberger's. 9% talked about clothing stores, boutique type clothing stores. That was primarily women specifically. And you did have 33% that said nothing. You don't need any more retail. You're fine the way you are. That is made up, it kind of expands beyond, but that's made up of those that really are more concerned about growth in the community, saying we have enough, we're meeting the needs of the consumer. But 2/3 see room for improvement and give some very specific suggestions for ideas to attract retail here. What about restaurants? 20%, well, the typical meals eaten out over the course of a week is about 1 in 5 meals residents eat out. The typical spending in the city of Shakopee, they spend about 35% of their restaurant dollars in the city of Shakopee, the other 2/3 in restaurants outside of the city of Shakopee. This also varies greatly depending on the amount and the type of restaurants that any community has. We did the same thing that we did with retail. Is there a general type of restaurant you'd like to see attracted? And then if there is, what specifically? 18% talked about family-style sit-down restaurants. Old Country Buffet, Red Lobster, Perkins, and IHOP. 9% wanted Italian. Olive Garden was the top pick of those folks. Steakhouse, 8% pointed to that, Outback specifically, and the 31% said nothing. We don't need any more restaurants here. It's perfectly fine the way it is. And those groups are almost 1 for 1. The 33% that said there's nothing that they needed for retail, and the 31% nothing for restaurants are almost a 1-to-1 of folks that don't see a need for either.
Can you explain why they've got Perkins here and they had Aldi's on a different screen? We've got them both. What would be the reasoning?
They might want it in their area of the city. Could be.
So we need a family-style Italian.
Council members, on the Aldi, it may also have been that the Aldi's is not constructed and open yet, so they don't perceive it yet.
Yeah.
Or you're currently building the Aldi's?
Correct.
I like that they consider Red Lobster a family style.
Hi, family. But
It's always funny on, especially the steakhouses, where you get into fine dining. You didn't have a lot of people saying fine dining here, but some communities, fine dining to one is not fine dining to another. Do they support financial incentives to attract and target development? Absolutely. 78% support it, 17% oppose it. If you look at the intensity, another train. I'm sorry.
we don't hear
All
it.
night long.
We don't hear it. Go ahead.
What was the percentage on noise again?
I thought it was drilling. I'm sorry. If you look at the intensity on this, it's 3-1 in favor of doing this. And this really has changed across Metro. 10 years ago when we started asking this question, it was much more a 50-50 proposition whether people wanted to see specific financial incentives. And since the recession, and I think a lot of communities lost employers and all of that, there really was a sea change. And now we see this 2/3 to up to 80% in a lot of communities saying, yeah, this makes a lot of sense if we can get in the type of development that we need for the community. So you're right in the norm of what we would expect today. What's a little different is you don't have a lot of strong opposition on it, but you have a lot of strong support, almost 20% saying absolutely.
What's the target development?
This is just a general.
So there wasn't a type of proposed development? It was
Right.
just in general?
Yeah, it was a general concept question. I can read it to you just to make sure it's clear.
We got a target here already.
No, I mean, was it office park type, or was it industrial, or?
Yeah, and it wasn't tied to, we have in some communities say, especially for retail, would you support for this specific retail you told us? But we kept it general here, and it just is, as the city of Shakopee continues development, do you support or oppose the city providing financial incentives to attract specific types of development?
I will add that, was this right after the question about the restaurants and retail?
It was that, yeah, we always follow it up after it's the last question on economic development.
So maybe not necessarily, but it kind of led up to this, so you never know what was in people's minds.
You could definitely say there's a correlation if you look at it, that if you talked about you're interested in retail and it gave specifics that they might be thinking about that in the incentive. The interesting thing though is you do have, like I said, there was 1/3 of the community that said there's no more restaurants or retail needed here, but you only have 17% that oppose using financial incentives to attract development. Empowerment. Do people feel that they could have a say if they wanted to with the city? 61% said yes, 34% said no, 5% were unsure, right at the suburban average. 60-35, 5% unsure. How do they rate the mayor and city council? Well, first off, we asked them how much they feel they know about your work. And life here isn't a fishbowl. You had 51% of the community say they either knew a great deal or a fair amount. Average on that across Metro is about 40% right now. So you're running about 10 points higher if people know, well, they think they know a great deal or a fair amount about the work you're doing. So how do they feel about the work you're doing? 59% approve, 27% strongly or disapprove or strongly disapprove, and 14% are unsure. So you have a 59-27 rating. It's very strong, actually. The norm right now across Metro on this is 55-40. It can really vary, and what varies a lot is the uncertainty and the amount of engagement that a community has. So you're doing better than the norm with a lot more people knowing what you're doing. How's the city staff doing? City staff is doing very, very nicely. 80% rated excellent or good, 12% only fair, nobody rated them poorly, and 8% said that they were unsure. You did have 36% that indicated they had had quite a lot or some firsthand contact with city staff, right about the norm. Normally about 34 to 35%, so you're just a little bit higher on it. On both of these, we always check with council and staff, either those that feel they know a great deal about the work you're doing, or those that have had a firsthand contact. Do they rate you higher, or do they rate you lower? Because if they rate you lower, that's more of a problem. And on both instances, the ratings were higher the more contact or the more they thought they knew about the work you were doing.
Did you screen the callers to see if they might be staff members?
That was not a demographic question. But they
This
could only,
could be slanted.
well, it could only, how many employees do you have? Yeah.
Be a Democrat.
Have you had contact with the city of Shakopee? 39% said yes, they had during the past year. That actually about 7 points higher than the norm on this question. 32% typically answer this one. Those that said yes, we asked them 3 questions. Rate the staff on courtesy, ease of obtaining service, and helpfulness. And what we use for a threshold on this for quality customer service is 80%. You can see you go above 80% on all 3 dimensions. On courtesy, you go over 90%. The lowest measure is always the lowest in any city, and that's the ease of obtaining service. So you're above the 80% threshold, but if you wanted to target anything, perhaps making it easier for folks to obtain the service that they need in the city. How do they rate the city's effort in keeping you informed in a timely manner? 72% said excellent or good, 26% said only fair or poor. About a 3-to-1 ratio places you within the top third of communities on it. And we're going to get into a little bit more specifics on communications in 2 charts. This chart combines 2 questions. We asked them what's their principal source of information, and then we asked them what their preferred source of information is. And what we're looking for is an overlap. You want to see a unison here that they're receiving information in a manner that they prefer. And you do have that. 27% indicated the newsletter was their principal, 34% indicated that's how they'd prefer it. So there is, in the newsletter I'll talk about next, there's a little bit more the newsletter could do in order to meet the needs of the community. Local newspaper and the city website mirror each other. You do have 11% that say that their principal source of information is word of mouth, the grapevine. And I always love the 7% that follow up with it and say that's how I prefer to get my information. Very honest here. Normally that really falls off. 10% will say I get it, and then 1% will admit that they want to get it that way. But you actually have pretty good overlap on that. 5% surprisingly said the cable television. Most of the time that is 0 or 1 or 2% is a principal source of information in a city. And we get specifically, we ask about watching council meetings. You have a very high viewership. And then if you go down to the
know.
Yes, yes. And 6% said they have no source of information, and for the most part, they're absolutely fine with it. We consider them clams. They're just happy not knowing anything.
Was there anything with those questions that went to social media and Facebook and those kinds of things? Was that not asked, or was that just not an answer?
That was the scattered
Yeah.
would be social, because they were open-ended.
Okay.
So they would respond back, and this is principal source of information. You know, sometimes cities, when they look at communication sources, they'll find, you know, the principal and the preferred, and then they'll do a list. You know, tell me, is this a major source, minor source, not a source? And, you know, social media, emails, and those sorts of things, they always tend to be a secondary source of information for folks. It's hard to get to a primary principal source.
All right.
Would the city's website, would some of the city's social media opportunities fall underneath the city website in this?
In the minds of residents, it could, but for the most part, they're talking specifically, they talked about going online and looking up about, you know, city council meetings, those sorts of things. They were looking for information. The 2% scattered, I know that there were Facebook in there when we coded them.
Okay.
The hometown messenger. 69% indicated they received it, 31% said they didn't recall it. That is actually pretty low. It's actually about 12 points lower than the norm across Metro. And when we saw this, we wanted to look at, okay, the 31% that don't recall seeing it, who are they? They tend to be renters, and they tend to be those under the age of 34. So there is room for improvement on the delivery system for the city newsletter. And it will also help in the communications, because you saw a 7% gap in those that it was their principal source versus those that preferred it as a source of information.
Is that an every door direct, or is that only homeowners?
No, it goes to every mailbox. It's combined with the Park and Rec brochure, and over the years, we've debated whether or not that gives it enough
Branding.
attention.
But
And
everybody gets it.
it does go to every address in the zip code.
So 30% of the population is uninformed about even getting it.
Yeah. They don't
Recall it.
they don't associate, the brand isn't there. Those that do, you have a very high readership. 84% indicated that they regularly read it. So once they get it in their hands, or realize that they have it in their hands, they're very likely to read it. And then they rate it very highly for format, content, and usefulness. So it's just a matter of getting them, I think, to realize that they have it in their hands, and it can be a useful tool for residents. At least it is for those that do read it. Like city council meetings, 8% said frequently, and there are times where this is 0%. So the average on it probably be 1 or 2%. You do have a high viewership. 16% say occasionally. So a quarter of the community is tuning in to city council meetings on a frequent or occasional basis. City website, 78% indicated that they had internet access. The places it's pretty normal. What we expect to see in the metro area and exurban areas is about 15 to 25% without access. It varies. Dakota County is kind of the epicenter. You'll have 10% that don't have access, but they really are the standout in the metro area here. So about 4 in 5 residents have access to internet. Of those that do, 62% indicate that they have viewed the city's website, which gives you an overall reach of about 48%. About half the community is using the website for information. Now, those half that are using it, what do they think of the website? They think you're doing a great job. 93% indicate the content is either excellent or good. Ease of navigation is always the major hurdle for any website with any organization, and you're actually doing an outstanding job on that. The norm on that is about 65% excellent and good, with about 25 to 30% saying it's only fair or poor. You're at 86 to 13. So about half the community is using it, and they view the content and the ease of navigation of it very strongly. Overall then, how would they rate the communications performance of the city? 78% said it was excellent or good. 21% said only fair or poor. Basically a 4-to-1 rating on it. And in looking at the database, this really does vary. It's actually a very strong rating with the newsletter being recalled by only about 7 out of 10 residents. But it places you within the top third, roughly, of communities on the overall communications performance. You do have, though, a lot of them in the soft category. And so I think with any communications that the city does and looks to undertake, the key is how do you move residents on this one? Because this is critical in forming relationships between the city and the residents from good to excellent as you look at communications in the city. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Councilor Lehman.
What percentage of our population was surveyed?
What percentage of your population was surveyed?
Yep, how many people did you call?
400. Plus or minus 5%.
Okay. And how do we get a copy of this?
Should've got one.
What's that?
Did you get one?
No. I got one in email, but I made a pact 14 years ago not to print for the city on my personal computer. It would cost me a fortune. I'll ask staff for it.
I'd be happy to provide it.
And then is there gonna be like we're gonna get a spreadsheet with tabs and things that we can dive into stuff? How's that work?
If you're interested, I mean, the city does, we, big book of demographic crosstabs and looking at key questions, so you can look at how seniors answered and everything like that. And we write up a report around the survey also. But a lot of people just use the crosstabs as doorstops, but there's a lot of interesting data in there.
That's Whiting.
I just thought, I thought it was pretty comprehensive in the questions we asked, and that was partly because of our input here, I think, but you guys did a good job on that. I thought it was a good mix of the age and locations and race and income. It seems like there was a lack of understanding on some of the city taxes, because I think we're a little lower than that. But I like the idea that they supported the economic development practices and that they feel safe in the community. I think that's important. And I thought there was kind of a lower use of the recreational facilities that I noticed. But you said it was pretty average or high.
In comparison, when you look at communities with similar demographics, yeah,
Okay.
you're a little bit higher than the norm. You're obviously much higher than, say, a city of Robbinsdale with their demographics, or Brooklyn Center. But that's why if you look at those with similar makeup of households with seniors versus households with children.
And I guess what surprised me was some of the information on the community center and what amenities were favorable. So that was good to know. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Luce.
What did you say the refusal rate was again?
4.5%.
4.5.
Yep.
And does that mean that people just said after they found out who you were that, no, we're not going to fill this out, or you just couldn't get in touch with who you wanted to?
It's a mix of both.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, once, I think there were 22 people, and I think 6 we never tracked down. 30 phone calls, and then we had to replace them.
All right. Councilor Lehman.
Is there an added cost for the report in format with the tabs in it?
No.
Or was that included?
No.
That was included?
It's all included.
Okay.
We're not attorneys.
Okay. The other comment I
I'm
just
sorry.
Are you awake to hear that, Jim?
Yeah.
Just a comment, Mayor, was under the staff rating portion. By your standards, you said it was pretty average, but for me looking at it, it looked extremely well. It makes me very proud of our staff.
Oh, yeah, it was high.
And I'd like our staff to know that they're doing a great job and we appreciate it.
And critically, they're doing a very good job with those they have the most contact with.
Right, and it shows in this survey, and it's not us up here; it's the staff behind us that do these things, and I just want to let them know that we appreciate it.
Agreed. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all.
We appreciate it. All right. Now we are going to move to reconvened. I need to entertain a motion to recess. Do you want to do this now, or you want to? Yeah, recess for Economic Development Authority meeting. Councilor Whiting.
Make a motion to recess to the Economic Development Authority meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilor Luce. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We are in EDA. President Lehman.
All right, calling the meeting to order. The roll call will be noted by the secretary, please. Motion to approve the agenda would be in order.
Make a motion.
Motion by Kathy Mokel, seconded by Mr. Whiting. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Consent agenda includes the minutes,
Mr. Chair,
bills. Mr. Whiting.
I'll offer to add the appointment of the EDAC positions to consent.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
A second. Anything else to be added to the consent? Any other discussion? So consent is gonna have the minutes, the bills, and the election of EDA officers for 2015.
No. The
No, the
candidates.
candidates,
Appointments,
right.
I'm
Number
sorry,
4B.
appointment of candidates to fill the vacated EDAC positions, vacant positions. My bad, thank you, just testing. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item number 4A, election of EDA officers for 2015. And I suppose a nomination for president would probably be in order.
This? There you go.
How come I don't have one of these?
It's on the table there somewhere.
You
It's
probably
probably just
buried
got
it.
covered up.
The last minute things. All right, what do we got going on here? Motion to open nominations for president. So,
Flamin?
Mr. Tabke,
I nominate Councilor Mokel for EDA president.
okay. Any other nominations for president? We gotta do that 3 times, right? Any other nominations for president? Last call? Nominations for president. All right. Nominations for presidents are closed. We vote on this, is that what we do? Motion to Mr. White.
Make a motion to move a white ballot for Kathy Mokel for president of the EDA.
Motion to white ballot for Kathy Mokel, president of EDA. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Luce. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Well, now we can turn it over to Kathy.
Do I have any motions for vice president? Oh,
Madam President, I'll open the nominations for vice president and nominate Mr. Luce as vice president of the EDA.
Second.
seconded by Mr. Lehman. Do I have a motion? Oh. how did I-
Any other nominations?
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Okay, I make a motion to close the nominations.
Motion to close nominations.
Second.
All those in favor say, oh, how do I have to do this?
Go ahead.
Oh,
I'll make a motion to cast a white ballot for Mr. Luce as vice president,
yeah, I
or
missed
as
one,
an
didn't I?
amendment.
And I'll second that.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Do we need to do the treasurer?
Yep.
Are we, okay. So motion to open nominations for treasurer, Mr. White.
I'll make a motion to open nominations for treasurer and nominate Mr. Tabke as treasurer of the EDA.
Have a second?
Second.
I'll-
Move to accept them.
I'll also add to cast a white ballot for Mr.
Any other
Tabke.
nominations? 3 times.
Any other nominations?
Yeah.
Any other nominations?
Sorry.
I'll get this someday. Any other nominations?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Whiting?
I will offer Mr. Tabke as a white ballot for treasurer of the EDA.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lehman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Mr. Tapke for treasurer.
No money.
Woohoo!
Motion to open nominations for secretary.
Madam
Mr.
Chair, I'll open nominations by nominating acting city administrator as a secretary, Chris Wilson.
Do we want to put that much more on?
Well, she's currently doing it, right?
No.
No,
Oh,
we
I'm
have-
sorry. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the other.
We generally have the city clerk
Right,
as that, so.
I'll make that nomination.
Any other nominations? Any other
I was
nominations?
thinking executive.
Just to be clear, that was Ms. Lori Henson,
Yes,
correct?
Ms. Laurie Hanson.
Okay.
Any other nominations? Ms. DiMaggio?
To be honest with you, I'd prefer that you just say the city clerk. I hope that Lori's always with us, but in case for some reason she's not and someone's acting as her, I think it might be better just to say the city clerk.
Is that a?
Yes.
Is that acceptable to the first and the second? Okay. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Motion to close the nominations.
Motion to close nominations.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Passes unanimously. All right. On to general business. Item 4C, authorization to acquire MnDOT parcels. Ms. DiMaggio.
I didn't prepare anything formal at this time. I think that you've reviewed it numerous times as council, so At this point, we're asking that these funds be transferred into the EDA fund and that the EDA actually authorize the documents to purchase the MnDOT parcels.
Motion, Mr. Whiting?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to authorize the acquisition of the MnDOT parcels as per their offer letter for the payment of $926,670 with the interfund loan from the city's equipment fund, and authorizing the appropriate EDA officials to execute the necessary documents to file the acquisition.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lewis. All those, do you have a question? Mr.
I do,
Whiting?
Madam
Okay.
Chair. What is the interest rate on the payback and the terms of the payback? Sorry.
Did we negotiate? I don't know if that was negotiated as a council. I'm not sure what those were.
Those were not, when the city council voted to acquire this property at this purchase price, the direction was that the funds come from the city's, an interfund loan from the city's equipment fund. The finance director was not with us that evening when you made that vote, and so staff probably should have asked that question. We'll have a
Bring
recommendation.
that back at the next meeting?
We'll have a recommendation on the agenda at your next meeting as to the exact terms of that.
Okay.
That won't hold up this
No.
process.
No.
No.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. Item 4D, adopt resolution number, resolution authorizing Minnesota Investment Fund application for Entrust data card. Ms. DiMaggio.
This was actually brought to you once before. Looks like on the 7th day of October 2014. Unfortunately, we had used a different resolution than required by the state of Minnesota. So I have a copy of our resolution, which was a 2-page resolution. And Deed would prefer that we use their 1-page resolution. So I'm now bringing it back to you, asking that we adopt a second resolution with Deed standard.
Mr. Whiting.
Any effective changes?
No, it should all be the same, except for we said whereas and they said be it resolved. But I think other than that, it's the same.
All right, Mr. Whiting.
Authorize, again, reauthorize, resolution number 2015-2, a resolution regarding the authorization and approval of the Minnesota Investment Fund application, grant agreement, and forgivable loan in connection with the Entrust data card or its affiliates.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lehman.
Madam Chair, couple
Consent.
of questions. First one is, this is the first resolution on EDA in all the years I've been here that I've actually seen it spell out the names of the executive director, which is what I meant earlier, which is usually the city administrator and the president by name. So that caught my attention because it happens to be my name on there, and it is the first time I've ever seen that. Usually it's just president and signed by president. And in the second paragraph, it specifically says that Shakopee, Minnesota, has a legal authority to apply for financial assistance and the institutional, managerial, financial capability to ensure adequate construction, operation, maintenance, and replacement of the proposed project for its design life. Am I, Jim Thompson, reading that to say that the city of Shakopee EDA will be responsible for these things for the life of this property or building?
I think Ms. DiMaggio will be able to explain that.
Sure. What we purchased for them was equipment, and I'm assuming that they had done that so that the life of the equipment, if something were to happen in turn, we aren't taking a lien on their equipment, though. We've decided to take a letter of credit instead. So
Okay.
I think if it was on the equipment, that's why they have that in there. If something breaks down on the equipment, that we would want to then take out a different piece of equipment.
Okay,
But in this case, we are taking a letter of credit instead.
okay. And why is this the first time I've ever seen the executive?
This is, as I said, the state standard resolution. This is the one that they've asked us to use. It does say you or your successors in office.
Okay.
So in this case, either you would sign it tonight or Ms. Mokel could sign it.
Okay.
I think though, I didn't, at the time, didn't take into consideration the swap out, so maybe I should have done that, but, and
Well, I
I
just-
didn't know who it would be, so I guess.
Past ones, I just have not seen it that detailed, and if this is a new format they're going with, we can expect this in the future. I would
Yes,
imagine.
definitely. This is obviously Deed's new
Okay.
resolution.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Motion to adjourn. Tuesday, March 17th.
So moved.
Mr. Tapke, seconded by Mr. Whiting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
All right, thank you, Madam President. We're going to move on to item number 10A1, potbelly pigs. I don't get to say
Mayor,
that very
members of the
often.
council, I'll try to keep this very brief. As you know, you had a prospective resident in front of you a couple of meetings back asking that you take a look at potentially changing the city's regulation to allow potbelly pigs. As you see from the report, Senior Planner Kyle Sabota and I both did some online research. As the report indicates to you, in Minnesota, I could only find 2 communities that have directly addressed the issue of pot-bellied pigs, and they would be Zimmerman, according to the National Association's list. And I found that St. Paul does allow keeping pigs with a license. You do have a draft ordinance in front of you. It would be an amendment to Chapter 10. If you are of a mind to change your regulations tonight or at a future date. If you have other questions or direction, we're asking for those this evening and would do additional research if you feel it's necessary.
Councilor Lehman.
Proper protocol, if I'm in favor of not changing the current zoning, would we take no action, or would we?
Correct.
Okay.
Other thoughts? Councilor Whiting.
Well, what's gonna be next? I mean, we got, it mentions pygmy goats. What's the next popular pet? That's the slippery slope I.
3 cows.
3 cows?
A bull, a mare, and a calf.
Is this start of a joke or? That's my question. You know, I feel sorry. It's a pet. I'm almost willing to say, look at it as a don't ask, don't tell kind of situation, and kind of until somebody complains about it. But I really don't want to go on that record of saying that. But
I believe you may have just done
that.
We won't tell anyone.
But
What pig?
I just
only 4% of the population watches our meetings anyway. So
I hate to codify it. That's all.
Well, I'll help you out. I feel the same way.
Well, and I
I'll take
think,
half the load.
I think part of that is, there's really no definition for potbelly, or it's just a pig. So I think that's what makes it harder to, if it was a, teacup pig, something like that, but there really is no breed that suggests that. I think that's where it could get to be a big animal, so.
And Councilor Mokel, members of the council, just to make it explicit for the record, it was the National Association of Potbellied Pigs that contained the article that I think we found most interesting that said, yes, there are pigs that are not 1,000 or 2,000 pounds, but there are no true teacup pigs. They grow to be about 80 to 200 pounds, and I've had dogs that weighed more than 100 pounds. I've been around pigs that were 100 pounds. They're fairly large animals at 100 to 200 pounds, so not quite the same thing.
And they eat it.
Although it was a very cute picture that prospective
Yes.
resident had.
yes, I am obviously very much the minority here because I don't understand if somebody can have a 200-pound bull mastiff in town with no issues whatsoever. Why can someone who wants to, as long as they're homeowners associate, as long as they're rules that they live within, why is it our job or our role to say whatsoever that this lady can't have a pot-bellied pig at her house? I couldn't care less whether she has a pot-bellied pig at her house. I mean, that's going to be dramatically less impactful to neighbors and to other people than a barking dog or a cat that gets out and runs around or anything like that. And so I don't understand why anybody up here would say, no, you can't have that, when we're okay with people having big dogs and okay with people having other things. I don't think that's our role whatsoever to say, or need to say that whatsoever, because I mean, there's zero harm that can come from this. There's zero issue as long as it's a personal decision to do that and have that kind of animal in their house. I don't see why we would have a problem with it. Councilor Luce.
As long as it's limited to what they call a potbelly pig, and as the resident said, it's going to be living indoors. It's not going to be outdoors. As we all know that have been around pigs, pigs stink. So, I would think the neighbors would have a problem with that, but if they want to have it in their house, I have no problem, but I think the ordinance should read strictly potbelly pig, not pygmy goat, not anything else.
Councilor Lehman.
I'm not even gonna go there. If they wanna have a farm, they should go out in the country. If they wanna have a pig inside their home, make the constitutional argument that it's your private property, inside your private property, your walls of your house, you're gonna do what you wanna do, it is private property. I'm fine with them having it if they want to, I don't care, but I'm not gonna sit here and legislate, make a policy or a law, local law for one individual. I think it's bad policy.
Well, it's, I mean, you are going directly against, I mean, we have this that has it spelled out exactly, as to what
I didn't support the
they can't
chickens either,
do.
so.
All right. Well, I feel bad for her because she was trying to do the right thing by coming here and saying that I want to move to your community, I want to be in your community, and but I have this animal and I want to keep it. I don't understand at all why we as a council would care
said
what
it-
she's got.
She said it was gonna only be, is truly gonna be inside her house. Well, don't ask, don't tell, nobody will know. Life is good.
I don't disagree with you there, and Councilor Whiting already outed himself on that one.
I
But
think 4 of us
I-
did, you're just the only one that hasn't.
You just want to put it in writing.
I think it's, I almost cursed for the first time as mayor on TV. I don't think that what we really think as want to have go ahead in reality and what we put in our code should be two different things. I mean, I'm more than happy to let it go and say, hey, you can do that, that's fine, but I don't understand why we have a specific line item here that everybody's not willing just to say, this is not a line that we need to have in our ordinance. I mean, it's more of a philosophy thing than about pot-bellied pigs exactly. And if nobody wants to do it, or if nobody cares, we should write an ordinance that says nobody cares. I mean, that's the full length of it. Councilor Whiting.
Well, it seems obvious that she has this in her community where she's at. I was surprised that no other communities have this codified into their control laws there, and I don't know that we should set a precedence and start it. If it's not an issue, if it's not, rooting around my fence line, I guess I don't care, but if it's indoors, no one's gonna know. And, before we had the chicken ordinance, there was plenty of chickens in town too.
Right.
So,
Mayor, I could probably point out a couple of different laws at various levels of governments that most of the population is breaking on a weekly basis.
So why wouldn't we fix things that need to be fixed?
I could just add, I don't know, I'm not the expert on it, but I know pigs and humans are very closely related. I don't know if there's medical or health issues with cohabitating, and maybe you know more since you're more familiar with the industry, but I don't know that that's an issue or not, but it could be. To me, those kind of houses, the pig pens in the house, I don't know, I don't understand it, I guess. I'm not willing to codify it.
Okay, so I'm assuming there's no motion?
Yep.
Does anybody want to make a motion that we're saying that it's okay that you disregard this ordinance? Anybody want to do that? No?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. All right, so we're going to move on to 10C1, Veerling Drive.
Me.
You wrote the memo.
I wrote the memo. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the table tonight is a memo that came out of some conversations that we've been having with representatives of Scott County in the past week or so, maybe 2 weeks, related to the temporary extension of Veerling Drive. You'll recall that Veerling Drive was extended so that it runs all the way through to County Road 69 on the west side of town in preparation for the County Road 169-69 interchange project. And once that temporary road was put in place, it was used as the primary detour of traffic for that interchange project. The project was completed and paid for through a partnership or an agreement between MnDOT and Scott County. And part of their agreement was that that temporary road surface would come back out when the project was done. The city at different points at staff and elected official levels, but never officially, has indicated a preference for the road staying in. And after much discussion with the county, it's come down to the fact that they would be happy to grant our request of leaving the road in, but that has costs for them. And therefore, they would like us to pick up those costs that they would experience as a result of agreeing to our request. And that cost specifically is they would have to write a check to MnDOT for $10,546, which is basically a refunding of the money that MnDOT had included in their original lump sum that was specifically allocated for removal of the road. So the question before the council tonight is if you wish to retain the temporary road surface so that we maintain that connection on the west side of town, then staff would need authorization to spend $10,546 from the Capital Improvement Fund to reimburse Scott County for the check they need to cut to MnDOT.
Council Lehman.
If we don't, they're gonna tear out the road, right?
Correct.
Okay, I would prefer we keep the road and pay the 10 for.
Council Whiting.
All right, I'm trying to understand this. So the county paid MnDOT to pull the road out, who I assume paid the contractor.
Other way around. MnDOT paid the county.
MnDOT paid the county to take the road out, to pay the contractor to tear it out. So tax money was spent to a contractor, I assume.
No.
Since the road wasn't tore out, MnDOT should get their money back for that portion that they would have cost them to have it removed
From whom?
from
Mayor, let me try this.
MnDOT.
If,
This is confusing, but
We should get a flow chart of some sort.
yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, there's a contract with MnDOT and the county. Part of that contract was to pay for the removal of the road. And through this, we had a memo, October, what was it, 7th? Brought this to the council attention. We wanted to keep it, made that mention. Said, whatever costs you may have occurred above and beyond, I said, yeah, we'd be interested in paying. Well, through a lot of negotiations, and I thought much of this was taken care of because we didn't get that offer letter. It wasn't supposed to come to us until this was taken care of. But Scott County has said they had extra costs, which I didn't know about, that they have occurred for the project. So they feel the city should make that payment for them to keep the road in place because we benefit for that road. And that's the long and short of it. We still will have costs when we remove the road later on, but that's the gist of it.
if I could add to that, Mr. Mayor, the county has not given any money to a contractor to pay for the removal of this road. They experienced cost overruns on the project, and the money that would have gone to pay for the removal of the road has been eaten up through other cost overruns, which under this unique agreement, or not unique, but under the type of agreement they have with MnDOT, all cost overruns become the county's problem. So if the road is to be taken out, they plan to do so with their own maintenance staff. And so they would incur very little costs for actually taking the road out, just the labor of their own staff. But if they don't take it out, they have to actually cut a check to MnDOT for the $10,546. And we're asking them, to keep the road in, and therefore they're asking us to reimburse them that cost.
Going back to MnDOT.
Oh, the web we weave.
Yes.
Yeah.
The tango.
I think we should get one more layer of government involved.
Yeah, well, we are. We're
It
about
already
to.
took 3 of us to explain it.
Right.
The feds involved and see how messed up we can really get it.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Council Whiting.
Where would this money come from?
The city's capital improvement fund.
Okay. Yeah.
Council Lehman.
I'll make a motion to authorize the expenditure of $10,546 from capital improvement, reimburse Scott County to reimburse MnDOT for temporary Veerling Drive to remain.
A second.
Councilor Moulton. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Do we have any discussion? Council Lehman.
What's the life expectancy of this temporary road? That's, depends how much we use it, I suppose.
It's actually pretty well built. I think we can get at least 10 years out of it. I mean, we're hoping that we're gonna do a permanent
Right,
road before that, but I'm pretty sure we can get 10 years out of it.
okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on to 10D1, approval of position profile and authorization to advertise for city administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your packet tonight is the final draft of the position profile, which is basically your advertisement for applicants for the position of city administrator. As you'll recall, the council walked through this with your recruitment professional, Sharon Klump, at your last meeting. So at this point, we'd like to know if there are any last-minute tweaks or changes to the document. And if not, you're asked to approve the position profile and authorize Ms. Klump to proceed with advertising for applicants.
All right, any concerns or questions with this?
No, I think it looks great.
What was that?
I thought it looked great.
Good.
Yes, lots of
Anyone else?
pictures.
Councilor Lehman?
They spelled Shakopee wrong and throughout the document. Just kidding.
Was that in the form of a motion?
Yep, it is.
All right.
Looks good.
Make it formally for me, would you please? You're on the front there. You're good.
Make a motion to attach a position profile for the position of city administrator and authorize Sharon Klump and Waters and Company executive recruitment to proceed with advertising for applicants.
We have a second. Second by Councilor Luce. Any discussion?
Your motion was to approve that.
Correct.
Yeah. Any discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, now we are going to go to item number 11A and 12A in closed session. So entertain a motion to, we need the,
Mike has it.
Mike's got 12A. Matt, can you do 11A, please?
do we do them?
Mr. Mayor,
How do we
here's
handle
my
that, Mr. Thompson?
suggestion. My suggestion would be, first of all, we're gonna go to closed session to discuss 2 items.
Correct.
All right. You can do it all by one motion, but why don't I stay the motion and somebody can just say so moved, because there has to be a motion by the council. The first portion of the meeting is closed pursuant to Minnesota statute section 13D.05 subdivision 3C to discuss possible acquisition of real property located at 234 First Avenue West. And the second portion of the meeting, is to close the meeting pursuant to Minnesota statute 13D.05 subdivision 3D, to receive a security briefing and report, and to discuss issues related to security systems and procedures at City Hall and at City Council meetings. And the police chief is determining that we need to close the meeting so that the information is not disclosed publicly.
We have that in a motion form.
Mayor, I'll make that motion and I can repeat that if you like.
Nope, we're good. Do we have a second? Second by Councilor Luce. Any discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We are moving into closed session. And we go on back.